We're live. All right, welcome to Upturned Table, and this is the third part. I think we can finish this tonight. Third part of the Muspelheim Dwarf Kingdoms. So the first part was the background setting for the dwarves, and then we did the different locations, all the subterranean locations in Trudvang, and now we'll be finishing off with the last of the Dwarven kingdoms, and so you get a kind of complete picture of everything that's going on in the setting. And I hope everyone had a good New Year. So we missed a few days because of the holiday celebration, but we're back, and we've got some more things to finish up. I definitely want to take a look at the 5e conversion that was done for Trudvang Chronicles, which they called Trudvang Adventures, and then also the stories. There was a set of tales from Trudvang that would be fun to read and have as audio on the channel. So, this is all in anticipation of later this year. We're getting a Dragonbane version of Trudvang. So the Dragonbane system will have this as a setting, just as the Drakar Ok Demonar had this as a setting originally when it was released. So that will be nice to have all of that in English. But these books, the system itself is a little heavy. The one that Riotminds made, maybe would have been nicer if it was just a basic role play, like a D100 Chaosium style system. But we will have the really nice and usable Dragonbane system. But hopefully they figure out a way to kind of switch the tone a little bit to be a little darker and more survival and a little less mayhem and mirth. But we'll find out. We'll find out what they do. All right. So this is the part 3 of Muspelheim, the second and concluding the Dwarven kingdoms. And of course, there's all this beautiful art. So apologies, I may have to raise the book at an angle where you can't see so well. I'm getting a really strange glare from the lights. And sometimes this ink it's almost like as a metallic look, so I can't read very well from the page. So forgive me. I'll also do an audio version of this, just kind of an MP3 download as a podcast, and then also audio on the RSS feed for Patreon. So let's continue the Dwarven kingdoms of Muspelheim. So our next kingdom is Erzmir. In the plains of Sylvan, in the southeastern part of Trudvang, the landscape is suddenly split by a giant fissure so deep that no man has yet been bold enough to fully explore it. It is here that the grand kingdom of Erzmir lies, wedged between two cliffs that form from the Erzmir fissure. Deep below in the crevice, where the rays of the sun can't reach, Bojornica dwarves toil frantically. Colossal stone blocks and grindstones have been raised from the bottom and on ledges seemingly never left to rest. One legend among the humans of this area claims that once there stood a mountain where there is now a fissure splitting the plains in two. The legend says that the dwarves who have lived in the darkness of the fissure have slowly but steadily dismantled the mountain in search for the noble metals and precious gems that were hidden within. Pebbles, grindstones, and the great fissure. On each side of the fissure lie two great fields of pebbles and dust. On the outskirts of these fields, the layers of pebbles are so thin, and those who've been brave enough to approach the edge of the fissure to search for gems and been lucky enough not to be found by the dwarves claim that they haven't reached soil or solid ground, no matter how deep they've dug. These fields of crumbled rock seem to grow larger with every passing year, and the people who live near the fissure are more than happy to talk about how far away the dust and pebbles were when their parents were young, and how the area has expanded with every passing generation. No one knows how or why the field is constantly increasing in size, but all are certain that the dust and the gravel are what's left of the stones that are mined in the depths by the dwarves. Although many have stood guard over the area, none have managed to see a dwarf ascend to the surface to discard the crushed and useless rock. Rhythmic noise constantly echoes from the depths of the fissure. Out over the plains, it comes from the enormous stone crushers that slam together with tremendous force and weight to break the rocks that have been placed between them. The hammering thunder of the crushers is joined by a perpetual screech from the dwarves grinding the rocks to dust as they search for the unbreakable gemstones. This deafening noise, awful and unbearable for anyone else, is like sweet music to the ears of the dwarves. The rocks hidden beneath Trudvang's topsoil are constantly mined to be smashed and broken in the mighty crushers. For those who've never seen anything similar, the crushers are indeed an impressive sight, seeing the colossal crushing blocks of the hardest black granite, and as tall as a 4-story building in human cities, and requiring more than 100 of the strongest dwarves to move, slowly rise, only to smash and sunder anything beneath it. It is a sight that would amaze most. The largest of the stone crushers breaks blocks as large as houses, which as they pass to the next crusher, that then in turn break the blocks into smaller pieces. Finally, the rocks reach the grindstones, where the rocks are, in just as many steps, ground into fine dust. Gemstones that are hidden in the stones are too hard to be broken or ground, and thus survive through the entire process, or are removed from the debris by the dwarves that constantly watch the process. Gems, coal, and trade. If other dwarven realms are famed for their forges and stonemasons, Erzmir is primarily known for the polished gemstones. The gems that are mined in the realm are both larger and purer than any of those from anywhere else in Trudvang. The gems are honed and shaped for years by the diligent gem cutters in all of Trudvang. The diamond that is said to decorate the throne of the kingdom's Thun is rumored to have been taken close to 200 human years and over 40 dwarves to cut and polish. All of the gemstones that are found in the kingdom, of all, only a fraction reaches the outside world. Those that are sold are not considered especially valuable by the dwarves, but are still counted as the most beautiful by humans. It is said that the largest and most stunning jewels are kept in a chamber behind the throne of the room of the Thun, and all of these stones have supposedly been cut and polished for 150 to 250 years. The kingdom is not just known for its precious gems, however. It is also famed for its coal, which is sold in distant lands since its quality seems unparalleled anywhere else. This fuel is the finest of its kind in all of Trudvang, and is said to burn twice as long as the coal which is mined in other places. Since the dwarves of this kingdom spurn the sun above all else, they have built great trade routes that lead from the depths to the surface. 1/3 of the way from the surface lie small trading stations, where humans can come to trade for coal, and in rare cases, gemstones. The roads, large enough to drive 2 carts next to each other, run through great tunnels to the trading stations. The entries to every station are guarded by thick gates, however, which can quickly be closed shut if greedy humans take what they desire without proper payment. Nothing like this has happened in 100 years, however. The Vertical Kingdom. Erzmir looks very different from the typical dwarven kingdom, for the whole kingdom is made up of a single city carved on both walls of the great fissure. are great ledges and plateaus, both natural and dwarf-made. The dwarven houses are located next to the giant grindstones and stone crushers. Between the two walls of the fissure are a myriad of bridges, leading back and forth between the two sides of the city, the many working places and settlements. The kingdom, or city, stretches a few hundred meters into the bedrock on each side of the fissure, but go too far, and soon one will find only long tunnels that lead deep into the bedrock and to the underground quarries. The Thune of the kingdom is Obada of Drimzolt's blood, and is more than 100 years old, but doesn't look a day over 60. It is rumored that the diamonds that decorate the Thune's throne hold the power which, through the mightiest Thulcraft runes, have been linked to the Zobadi. While most of his brothers are of the upper echelon of the gemstone cutters, 2 of them are stone seekers, who determine what the stones that are sent to the Brotherhood should be shaped into. These 2 are the most powerful Thuls in the kingdom, the most powerful the kingdom has ever seen during its entire history, and it is these 2 who have managed to link the power of the diamond to their elder brother. Now they seek gemstones with similar powers, so that they can link them to themselves, and thus achieve the same mighty age as the Thune. Sunny days. The thundering noise echoing from the fissure only stops once every year. It is when the sun reaches its highest point in the sky, and an angle so that its rays actually shine all the way down to the bottom of the deep fissure. For 5 days and 5 nights, the whole kingdom is completely silent. The local dwarves, who are all convinced that they would turn to stone if they were exposed to sunlight, stop working and hide deep in their darkest caverns, where they sit without moving or even talking to each other. Empty-eyed, they sit and stare into the wall before them, as if it could crumble at any moment and allow the annihilating light to shine through. When the danger has finally passed, and the rays of the sun no longer reach the most elevated settlements of the fissure, a great feast erupts that lasts for just as many days and nights. The dwarves eat and drink as much as they otherwise would over a period of half of a year during these days. The dwarves wear masks that depict the frustrated face of the sun when it has realized that it hasn't been able to destroy the dwarves this year either. These masks are only removed to enable the wearer to drink or eat. The dwarves don't ever sleep during these days. When the feast is over, the dwarves fall asleep wherever they are currently located, only to wake up 3 nights later after having been awake for 10 whole days. Once they've slept off the intoxication and regained the strength to work, the noise of the crushers and the grindstones resounds from the depths again. During these days of serenity, humans rush to the edge of the cliffs, hoping to get a glimpse of what hides in the depths. There are a few every year who can't control their own greed, and thus they climb into the fissure, fearing for their lives as they search between the mighty crushers and gemstones and grindstones. Most of those that journey into the fissure return empty-handed, but a few of them have actually managed to steal small gemstones that the dwarves haven't been able to hide before the rays of the sun have closed in on them. Far from everyone that climbs into the kingdom returns, however. Many of these adventurers fall to a certain death during the long climb in and out of the fissure. Some never return, but disappear completely and without a trace. People who have lost friends in this manner say that their friend had stood next to them and talked only to be gone in the next moment without a sound or a trace. They say that they couldn't find where their friend could have gone, no matter how much they searched around them. Whether these fortune seekers are claimed by clever traps, or it was something else, no one knows. Nice. Glitzmakulji. In the middle of the massive Fjargan River, in the northwest of Trudvang, just below ground level, a subterranean lake fills a large cave in the bowels of the mountain. The lake is so big that it takes a dwarf 2 days to walk around it. How deep the lake could be, no one really knows. In some places, it is only a few meters, while at others, it seemingly lacks a bottom. On the walls that frame the mere calm lake, as well as on the cave floor leading up to the edge of the shores, lies the enormous city of Glitzmakulji. Glitzmakulji, or Glitterham, as the city is called by humans, makes up the center of the land, and it was here the cursed people once fled a long time ago. Legend says that those of the blood of Trodnik had cursed all of Trevlagoya the day when they, by mistake, brought down the wall that protected the land from the cursed endless dark chasms. A mysterious maze of tunnels and abyss inhabited by a powerful dark entity. A heavy aura of evil could be felt by all of those who approached the chasms. The miners have reached part of the underworld which was originally meant by the mountain spirit to remain unknown to the dwarves. Doom and desperation were now bound to fall on the sons of Borjorn. The punishment for this unthinkable act was death, and all of the blood of Trodnik were to receive the same fate. The Borjonika dwarves of the blood of Trodnik were, however, given a short time to prepare for their coming end. During this time, they had the opportunity to placate the spirit of the mountain by finishing the buildings and objects they had been occupied with. When all projects were finished, they were to meet their death in the depths of the mountain. A whole Glorka of nearly 2,000 dwarves would voluntarily throw themselves down into the hot lava, which flowed like warm blood deep below the surface of Trudvang. Here they would once again become one with the mountain. By sacrificing themselves in this manner, they could help the mountain in creating new stone and ore, and the hope was that this significant sacrifice would break the curse. But none of the blood of Trodnik took the path of suicide. Instead of completing what they were doing, and then sacrificing themselves, all of the members of the cursed bloodline fled west into the endless dark chasms. Those of the blood of Bajnev took upon themselves the task of hunting down the fleeing Trodniks to complete the punishment that had been imposed on the refugees. Around 1,000 battle-trained dwarves went into the endless chasms on the hunt for the cursed people. For years, both those of the blood of Blajnev and those of the blood of Trodnik wandered deeper and deeper into the dark chasms. After many years of wandering and misery, those of the blood of Trodnik finally reached the other side of the dark chasms, where they found a great subterranean lake, which glittered like silver in the light of the shining crystals, called Glitzaljas. The concerns that their pursuers might find them was great, and because of this, they tore down the wall through which they had come. Here by the lake, those of the blood of Trodnik then laid down the foundations for the city, which would soon become the center for the entire kingdom and its people. Years came and went without the pursuers showing up, and during the time when the dwarves lived beneath the raised wall, the city grew in size. What happened to the pursuers, no one knows, but the Bludnev family quickly died out in Trologoya, as if the curse had afflicted the lost pursuers instead of the whole land of guilty dwarves of Trodnik's blood. The city of Glitzmakulyi and the lake. Glitzmakulyi is really several small cities, which through the centuries have grown into each other around the lake's western shore, so that today the city almost certainly encompasses the western part of the lake. Aside from the mighty buildings that have been built on the beach and in the cave walls, there are a number of inhabited islands, which rise here and there in the subterranean lake. In the little harbors on these islands, flat-bottom boats rest, whose wood has been collected from above ground. The islands have become home to those that have the rare among the dwarves occupation of fishing, and who make a living by catching the so-called vritfish, which have become something of a delicacy next to the tunnel hog. The vrit is a milky white fish that can grow to be over 4 meters long, and which requires 2 dwarves to put their arms around its middle. But all the islanders do not make a living from fishing the vrit. There is a small, hardened group that has specialized in catching giant water snakes. Despite the snake being the symbol of evil, the evil god Yuk, the giant snake has become a valuable delicacy that only the richest can afford to buy. By eating the flesh of the giant snake, one can show one's contempt for Yuk, with the hope that the evil god will pick an easier prey than a dwarf who has the courage to defy the god. The high price that you have to pay for a meal of giant water snake is not because these snakes are rare, but rather because it is very dangerous, a dangerous endeavor to catch them. Many of those who have paid with their lives while struggling to capture a giant water snake. Glitzalya's crystals. The name Glitzmakulyi comes from the dull and sometimes silvery lake that a certain type of crystal emits, silvery light that a certain type of crystal emits from their positions in the mountains. The crystals, which are found in greater numbers in the area, grow everywhere in the mountain, on walls, floors, and on mighty stalactites and stalagmites. Here and there, great pillars also rise through the enormous lake, supporting the roof of the cavern. Each pillar testifies of the great span of time that has passed before the stalactites and stalagmites are finally united with each other to form a pillar that exists today. The Glitzalya's crystals growing on these pillars emit a stronger light. It seems like they have more power to shine than the crystals that grow in other places on the mountains. Consistently shining crystals creates an endless day to reign in Glitzmakulyi. Visitors from other parts of Trudvang have a hard time adjusting to the constant light. The very few humans and elves who have ever visited Glitham cannot endure the lack of darkness during the night, while, on the other hand, dwarves from the other kingdoms complain that the local light is unnatural and forces them away from the constant darkness of low light in which most dwarves are used to living. The Glitzalyas do not seem to grow anywhere else than in the mountain range. When the crystal is taken down from its place, it dies, and its light slowly but surely ebbs away. Although the Glitzalya's light lasts longer than in other crystals, some crystals gathered from the grown-together pillars can shine for as long as 100 years, while crystals gathered from other places only shine for a third of that time. The crystals have become popular among the wealthier dwarven families around Trudvang, where they are used to light tunnels and vaults. Some dwarves from other kingdoms say that it is a great shame to barter with the cursed people of Glitham, and that it can only lead to great misfortune for those that do it. For even today, there are dwarven bloodlines which remember the sacrifices which those of the blood of Trudvang refused to make. Even so, the crystals of Glitsmakulji are appreciated throughout Muspelheim, and their trade has continued to flourish during the centuries. Fish, gold, and coal. Aside from the lake of Glitsmakulji, there are several other subterranean lakes under the mountains of the Foldgand, but none of them are as big as the lake by the capital. Because the lakes have been proven to be an excellent source of food, settlements of different sizes have sprouted around them, around these bodies of water. Everything from cities to smaller villages. Many believe that the lakes of the Foldgand Ridge are connected by underground canals. This belief is supported by the fact that the Vrietfish have gone away from fishermen with hooks still in their mouths and have been caught by other fishermen in the lakes far away. A fish that has gotten away in Glitsmakulji may then be caught in a subterranean lake situated in a mountain far away from the place where they were originally caught. The dwarves can tell that the hook belongs to a fisherman from another lake because of the runes that show where they were made. Just like other dwarf professions, fishermen also want to name and put their mark on their tools, and tools that make them able to carry out their work. Aside from the shining crystals, Foldgand Ridge is rich in gold, something that shows in manufactured objects that the dwarves of this kingdom produce. Pretty much everything is created in gilded with intricate golden patterns, and the goldsmiths have mastered the incredibly high levels of craftsmanship renowned throughout Trudvang. The kingdom of Glitsmakulji, which has received the same name as the city and the lake in its center, spreads out from the capital like a three-dimensional spiderweb of tunnels and passages, and this web is tied together by small settlements and villages. Unlike most other dwarven lands, Glitsmakulji is not very deep. There are tunnels which, of course, go down deeper into the underworld than normal mine shafts, connecting the special logi furnaces and the other important places. But the deepest inhabited places lie only just below the feet of the mountains. The mountains of the Foldgand Ridge also have coal deposits. These are not the same quality of what one can find in Esmir, and are all superficial for dwarven standards. Rather than losing time and resources, dwarves prefer to get it from Amurs, the human wild folk who live on the surface of the mountains. The Amurs have developed a relatively sophisticated technology to refine coal, and they barter it with gold. Thus far, the dwarves have been happy of the deal, although a few of them have grown curious about the Amurs' technique of coal refining. The coming of the dragon. The southernmost parts of the Foldgand Ridge is today uninhabited because the caves there have been claimed by a large yarnworm. As long as can be remembered, these parts have been in the dragon's grip, and it is now over 450 years since the area was completely lost after nearly 80 years of bloody skirmishes with the dragon. The yarnworm, whose name is Borjev, or Blood Maw for the humans, is a mighty beast, and one of the reasons why the dwarves prefer not to settle down deeper under the mountains than they do. For it is rumored that Borjev has not only taken the southern parts, but also has found great caverns and passages in the depths under the mountains, where the lava flows. That the dragon is mighty, nobody doubts. Stories tell of how over 100 dwarves at a time could be killed when Borzjev spat its magma breath over the troops who came to destroy it. Few were those that managed to endure the unimaginable heat that the dragon radiated, and this despite the dwarves being a race resistant to heat. Despite the large numbers of dwarves, they could not match Borzjev's raw strength and power. Not even the razor-sharp Mitraka spearheads could pierce the hard scales of the dragon. After several years of defeat, they could only admit that the southern parts were lost. Several more or less half-hearted attempts have since been carried out to drive the dragon away from the halls and tunnels of the mountain. None of these attempts have, however, come even close to succeeding. It is not a desire to retake the lost regions that is the biggest reason why the dwarves of Glitzmakulji want to drive the Yarnvarm away. The biggest reason is the precious objects that the fleeing dwarves had to leave behind. Because all objects that are created are regarded as more or less holy by the dwarves, they see the mission to reclaim them as an act of faith. Because these objects contain the spirit of the mountain, it is less their loss than that is the biggest reason for wanting them to drive the dragon away. Brave dwarves that have gone into the region say that the Yarnworm has plundered almost all the stockpiles of the treasure chambers that have been filled with objects and heirlooms during the long time when the dwarves lived there. Where the dragon has taken the treasure, no one knows, but considering that yarnworms like to gather their treasure in a single large hoard, it is likely to be somewhere near next to Borzjev. In recent times, the dragon has become considerably more active than he has been for several hundred years. Why this is so, no one really knows, but it is thought that it has to do with the steadily declining stock of tunnel hogs. Borzjev has simply eaten his larder bare, and now has begun to search for another source of sustenance. Glitzmakulji today. For 450 years, all of the great thuns of Glitzmakulji have faced defeat against the dragon, while the current Storthun, Woodbarov, unlike all of his predecessors, has yet to send any troops to try to drive the beast away, despite the fact that traditionally all the previous Storthuns have issued this order as soon as they have assumed power. He says that he is waiting for the right moment, and that he and his closest advisors have far-reaching plans for how the attack should be carried out. Many of those that went to see the dragon die the worst of deaths for what it has done to the spirit of the mountain in Glitzmakulji. They think that Woodborov's biggest concern in the land should be to retake the stolen artifacts, which are lost in the southern caves controlled by the Yarnvarm. The objects should then be distributed to the Glorkas of dwarves, which once managed to escape the dragon, so that the objects can once more rest under the stewardship of the rightful dwarves' bloodlines. Many also feel threatened because the dragon has become more active during these last few years. At approximately the same time as the first reports about the new activities of the dragon started to circulate, a political faction with members from all social classes began to gain strength in the land. The faction has, during the last few years, worked hard in the shadows to remove Woodbarov from the throne, because he has not done anything yet to drive the dragon away. The faction, which has won new support during these years, wants to replace Woodbarov with a well-spoken warrior by the name of Frondor. Some say that it would be against the gods to carry out such a coup, because the Storthun Woodbarov has been sent by the gods. The faction, however, thinks that their desire is legitimate, and counter these arguments by saying that it is Woodborov who is not following the wishes of the gods. What he has done not only goes against the gods, but also the spirit of the mountain, since he has let objects remain in the clutches of the dragon without trying to reclaim them. Frondor is the one and only who has openly criticized his great Storthun about Borzjev, but he has distanced himself from the faction, which is currently doing everything they can to undermine the Storthun's power. Rumors, of course, suggest that Frondor is the real leader of the faction, even if he has not said it in plain words, and that he wants to seize the throne. On the other hand, he is waging a hard campaign to get Woodrov to equip his subjects. Frondor is willing to lead the troops himself, which might strengthen his loyalty to the Storthund Woodborov in the eyes of those who would doubt him. The power struggle has been going on for almost 7 years, and the land is more or less divided into camps, those who support Woodborov and those who want to see Frondor as the land's new Great Thun. Woodborov has lately started to investigate who the driving forces behind this hostile faction are. To his great dread, he has discovered that some trails actually lead directly to his closest advisors. He has yet to air his suspicions, but while searching for more solid evidence, he instead tries to trick these unreliable advisors with less honorable motives, in order to maneuver them into making a mistake and revealing their true loyalties. To appease those who would strongly support him staying on the throne if he only did something about the Iron Dragon. Woodborov has gathered an armed small guard. He knows that these warriors are by far not enough to drive the dragon away, much less slay it, but the mission he plans for them is none of this. Instead, their mission would be to spy on the dragon. Woodborov wants to know as much as possible before he takes any action. Which he knows that he eventually must. Especially not that the dragon has become more active, the political tensions in the land has reached a level where something must be done if he wants to remain the Great Thun. But Woodborov has not waited to proclaim safety measures around his city. Here and there he has started construction of ingenious dragon traps that will catch or kill the dragon should it get close enough to the city. They are predominantly the same basic type of trap, but because making dragon traps has become a profession for a whole clan, there is a number of variants. The most used dragon trap revolves around the walls of a tunnel being loose, and therefore movable. 2 large rooms are dug out on either side of the walls where the dwarves can spring the trap. In the walls there is a number of holes that are hidden with the help of the work of the best stonecutters, so that the dragon cannot spot them easily. When the dragon has walked into the trap, the dwarves drive great barbed spears through the holes in the walls into the dragon's body, and at the same time other dwarves set in motion machinery which will slowly move the front part of the walls toward each other until they form a cone. The spears are so big that they often take 15 dwarves to maneuver them, and are equipped with stops that prevent the dragon from backing up and pulling the spears out of the wall. At least not without tearing out large parts of its body, where the barbs of the spears are stuck. If everything goes as planned, the trap will have enclosed the dragon. The beast will not be able to move forward, since the walls do not permit this, and it cannot move backward without gravely injuring itself. After that, they only have to wait until the dragon dies from its wounds that the spears have given it. Besides the small dragon guard that Woodborov recently put together to investigate the lost regions, there is an order consisting of a group of warriors whose lineage can be traced back to the dwarves who fought the first battle with the dragon 450 years ago. Drogbajev, or Dragon Slayers, as they call themselves, have built their stronghold in a cave that is situated approximately halfway between the Lost Regions and the city of Glitzmakulyi. The order today consists of around 400 robust warriors who all have elder brothers who fought the dragon in the past centuries. Drogsborjev do not take orders from anyone other than their master, which has made both the Storthun and his rivals upset. Woodborov has tried to convince the order to submit to his command and thereby carry out his will and his mission. By doing this, he would not have to put together and train his own guard in the art of dragon slaying. But the order answered that they could not do what their Thun wished, even if they themselves wanted it. They said that they have sworn an oath to follow an old agenda, which was established by the elder brothers of their Glorkas, shortly after the original escape from the dragon. To violate this oath would be equal to committing suicide in a soulless mountain. When Woodborov asked what their agenda consisted of, they could not answer him. They said it could only be revealed to the initiated, and not even to all of those. The rivals of Woodborov have also contacted the Drogbajev, seeking their support in removing the Storthun. The order then answered that they did not care about any political games of power, or even who the great Thun of Glitzmakulyi was. They revealed that they recently had to reject the Thun's request for help, which immediately caused the rebel faction anguish. That the great Thun had been in contact with the Drogbajev could only mean one thing, that he had seemingly started to find ways to counteract their big leverage on him. The members of the faction, therefore, had to resort to emergency measures. By doing so, moved several steps ahead with their plan of removing Woodborov. What their new, slightly panicky plan is based on, only the future can tell. As a dressing on the wound for the hostile faction, trolls have started to make their way into the endless dark chasms during the last few months. Why they have done so, no one can really understand, because it is over 700 years ago when they last tried to attack the dwarves of Glitzmakulyi. After a great defeat, they were pushed back to the dark chasms by the defending dwarves, who then brought down the passage that the trolls had come from. 4 towering stone fylges were stationed to guard the chasm from which the trolls had arrived. When these stone fylges were then investigated, it turned out that someone had changed the instruction that would awake them. This fact immensely made Woodborov accuse the hostile faction, because only a dwarf with the power of a Thule could change the instructions that were given to a stone fylges. The great Thun at the same time became worried, since only a very powerful Thule could undertake the change. The faction who, via a neutral party, denied the allegations, instead tried to turn them around, so that it was the Storthun Woodborov that was accused. They said that only a Thun's closest Thule would have enough power to change the instructions that were set to awaken a stone fylges, and that Woodborov has done this to slander the faction. What both the faction and Woodborov know and are concerned about is that none of the Thules have enough power to change instructions of these mighty stone fylges. At the same time, rumors have sprang up about not only trolls being spotted in the vicinity of the endless dark chasms, but also masked and oddly clothed dwarves from outside Glitzmakulyi. these rumors have sparked other rumors. With a panicky voice, they are spread from dwarf to dwarf among all citizens of Glitsmakulhi, who all hail from the blood of Trodnik, or other closely related bloodlines. The rumors say that those of the blood of Blundjev have now finally reached them, and that they, during thousands of years of exposure to the hate and affliction from the entity of the endless dark chasms, have become a sort of monstrosity, and that they have come to take their revenge for the sacrifice that was denied, which in turn led to their whole family being cursed. The Cursed People. Since their escape from Tulvagoya, the dwarves of Glitsmakulhi have been called the Cursed People by other dwarves. Woe, misery, and failures are often blamed on those of the blood of Trodnik, who today live in the massive mountains of the Froldgand Ridge. Dwarves from other lands speak of them as a despicable bloodline who no one should have dealings with. Few are those that know what really happened and what led to the family's escape out of Tulvagoya. Despite these, they believe that those of the blood of Trodnik are the cause of misfortune, curses, and other bad things that happen to them. Trade and other contacts should be kept as minimal as possible, optimally having none at all, so that one does not become afflicted by the curse oneself. What the curse entails or how it manifests itself, no one really knows, but the dwarves of Glitsmakulhi are spoken of as the black sheep of the dwarves, a family that defies the gods and who should not exist. It has even gone so far that when dwarves from Glitsmakulhi are traveling and want to visit another dwarven kingdom, they are simply denied entrance at the gates of the land. Some more extreme groups even want to go so far as to suggest a purge of those of the blood of Trodnik. They want dwarves from all other lands in Trudvang to unite in a mighty army, which once and for all would exterminate the family, as it was supposed to. The wrath of the gods grows every day because those of the blood of Trodnik still breathe, they say. The extremists argue that as long as Trodnik's blood exists, the gods will not be able to help the dwarves of Trudvang achieve their perfection that they constantly strive toward in their work with the materials of the mountains. Some even go so far in their accusations against the family as they blame on the blood of Trodnik even the restless spirit which curses the faraway kingdom of Broadmutskrim. There is an extremely small number of dwarves who stand by those more extreme views, but in the southwestern parts of Tulvagoya, there are clearly more in other places. Others, more neutral towards those of the blood of Trodnik, say that it is jealousy that plays a large role in the allegations towards the dwarves of the Froldgand Ridge. They argue that Glitsmakulhi's great stores of gold create jealousy, and when you see the forged golden objects, it is easy to say that no other family can make as beautiful golden objects as those of the blood of Trodnik. In addition, it seems that in other dwarven kingdoms, the Glorkas whose prominent handicraft is to forge gold, are the ones who are behind the most severe allegations against Trodnik's blood. The Endless Dark Chasms. The Endless Dark Chasms consist of a series of deep chasms in the primary rock that are in some places several kilometers deep, while in other places they are only around 10 meters deep. Some chasms are up to 100 paces wide from wall to wall, while others are so narrow that only a hand can fit in the chasm. Their length varies as much as they do in depth and width. The dark chasms are often lie in different levels, which means that one chasm's bottom could very well be the same height as another's roof. And some chasms lie directly above one another. Almost all adjacent dark chasms are somehow linked together, either through a short path or through an opening in the wall. This makes it possible to go from one dark chasm to another, but you have to be prepared for some climbing, because a path from one chasm to another can vary greatly in terms of height. It is said that the dark chasms exist throughout the primary rock of Trudvang, and that if you only knew the way, you could travel between them and all the dwarven lands in the whole world through these. Together, the dark chasms form an incredibly complex labyrinth, which all dwarves hesitate to enter, but it is not only the danger that the treacherous labyrinth represents that makes the dwarves hesitate to enter. Ever since the dwarven race awoke when Trudvang was young, they have been warned of what is said to dwell within. An evil entity whose neither name nor appearance is said to live among the endless dark chasms and capture all who wander therein. What the entity is, or what its purpose is, nobody knows. As soon as dwarves learn to speak, they are warned of the endless dark chasms, which has become the name of both the chasms and the entity that is said to live within. Ever since the early days of dwarven civilizations, the dark chasms have been known as a dangerous and desolate place. Those who have dared to enter the dark chasms to investigate the entity, and who have also made it back out, describe how they felt an ancient evil enveloping their bodies. They say that they felt a coldness encompassing them, how they felt as if they were being scrutinized by a being as ancient as the mountain itself. Rumors tell how dwarves who have come out of the dark chasms look different than when they went in. Some have lost both their hair and their beards. Some have ash-gray skin, and others have come out with white hair. Vintner weavers have been allowed access to the areas, and they say that they have never seen a place filled with such a concentration of dark vintner than there. After only a few moments in the outskirts of the dark chasms, the enormous energy has made the vintner weavers lightheaded and nauseous, which has made them either flee or run straight into the chasms, never to be seen again. The vintner weavers, who are well read about the phenomena, speak of a magical entity. They say that it may be an unknown and incredibly powerful form of Logi, which lives in the dark chasms. One that does not look like fire, but which is instead invisible, with mighty evil powers. It constantly seeks new vintner or hidden energies, which is inside the life of every creature, and it is this hunger that the dwarves feel when the cold entities encompass them. Some vintner weavers also suggest that maybe the endless dark chasms also host in their depths some kind of perverted Hulgris or vintner node, from which the Nordfires or vintner streams flow, sometimes bringing the dark vintner energy, other times stealing it from everything which is around. The reality is that nobody knows what really dwells in the deepest parts of the endless dark chasms. Aside from the evil entity that is said to be one with the dark chasms, there are many trolls and other dangerous creatures living among the chasms. The dwarves of Fjallgan Ridge argue that evil attracts evil, which has caused evil beings to come down from Trudvang's surface into the dark chasms, where they, for ages, have been corrupted and changed by the presence of the entity. It is said that today the chasms hold hideous creatures that do not exist anywhere else than here. They claim that the evil living among the dark chasms is so great that, like a magnetic rock attracting metal, the entity attracts evil beings from all corners of the world. The more evil the being is, the greater the chance that the entity can reach it and lure it down into the depths. The dwarves also believe that it is the entity in the endless dark chasms that is the reason why the yarnworm has settled down in the southern parts of the land. Because many have recently seen mysterious dwarves with masks and clothes, and no one can recognize in the area around the dark chasms, rumors are now spreading in Glitzmakulki that there are also evil dwarves, corrupted by the unknown entity, among the creatures who dwell among the dark chasms. As of yet, as far as they know, no one has fallen upon misfortune because they met these mysterious dwarves. But according to rumors, it is only a matter of time before this happens, for the rumors state that it is those of the blood of Bludgenev. Sorry. For rumors state that it is those of the blood of Bludgenev who have found a way through the dark chasms and have now come to seek their revenge. During recent times, the rumors of the Bludgenev family have split with two different stories. One says, when those of the blood of Bludgenev gave up their pursuit, they managed to settle down among the dark chasms, where they have created a kingdom of their own, just like those of the blood of Trudvang have done in Glitzmakulki. If this is true, no one knows how many there might be, because they themselves have grown much in number. The other rumor says that it is those of the blood of Bludgenev who were lost in the dark chasms, and when this happened, the entity inhabiting the chasms refused to allow the souls to leave their bodies to become one with the mountain. The rumor therefore says that those of the blood of Bludgenev have become forces of undead, who for thousands of years have wandered among the dark chasms, with only one thing driving them: to get revenge. No matter which of these rumors is closest to the truth, both have helped to create fear in the kingdom of Glitzmakulki, and the fear of an attack grows ever stronger with every passing day. Especially now, when the trolls have come out of the dark chasms and started to cause trouble. The Lost Regions and Borzhev, the Yarnworm. The southern parts of the land, or the parts which today are called the Lost Regions, make up almost a third of the entire ancient kingdom. Here the dwarves came not long after Glitzmakulki, the city by the lake, was founded. Even if the southern parts cannot house a metropolis as big as that, they were still three impressive cities in the area. The first was a city called Olskov, which was built in an enormous cave, high above the ground level of Trudvang, in one of the Folgan's Ridge's highest mountains. It was also the city that was the first afflicted by the fury of Borzhev the dragon, because the city had a connection with the world outside and the open skies, for the dwarves who lived there were not afraid of what existed outside of the mountains, and some of them settled down along the mountainside, where the dwellings today only exist in the form of weathered ruins. When the Yarnworm came, the dwarves out there tried to hold him off, while some tried to raise the gate which led into the city of Olskov. But the dragon overwhelmed them, and before they could demolish the gate, the beast had already gotten in. After having destroyed numerous buildings and killed large parts of the city's inhabitants, he continued into the mountain's interior. For 80 years, the dwarves held the southern parts before they finally capitulated to the dragon and went north. The dragon had then killed more than half of all the dwarves in the area and ruined 2 more cities and a few smaller settlements. Many argue that it is the most beautiful parts of Glitzmakulki's kingdom that had been evacuated. The crystals which grow in these southern regions were both bigger and spread a stronger and different light than those that exist in the northern part of the land. That a dragon is still in the southern regions, no one in Glitzmakulki doubts, but they don't agree on how many dragons exist within the bowels of the southern mountains. Most say there is only one dragon living there, while others say that there are two, and a few even go so far as to say there is an entire family of dragons of 5 or 6 individuals. The division regarding the number of dragons is caused by a great variation in stories that exists around the dragon and the escape from it. Because many dwarves manage to escape from it, there is a variety of different portrayals which have been passed down through the years. It is the differences in these stories that laid a foundation for the speculations of the number of dragons. The big difference in the stories are primarily about the dragon's color. Some describe Borjev as being of blood red color, while others say that he is almost completely black. Even the dragon's size changes dramatically from story to story. Some dwarves claim their older brothers have said that Borjev was gigantic and looked very old, while others supposedly said that the dragon was neither big nor old-looking. Of course, stories have changed during the years since the escape took place, but the description of the dragon would turn out to be different, and it is hard to explain if there is not really more than one dragon. The dwarves of the Foldgun Ridge believed that Borjev and its family, if there are more than one dragon, live deep below the feet of the mountain where the lava flows. They believe that the yarnworms bathe in lava and the lava is rejuvenated, and that this is the reason that they can live for so long. No one knows the gender of Borjev, and there is therefore an argument about whether the dragon is a female who has invaded the mountain's interior to give birth to her offspring, or if it is a male who prepared a nest for his female. Should it turn out to be that there are several dragons living deep in the mountain range, all are fairly certain that Borjev is male, because he is sometimes described as gigantic, old, and almost black in color, while the smaller and more delicate dragon, which is more blood red in color, is considered to be the mate of Borjev. The dragon today. In recent years, the dragon has become increasingly more active. This is indicated by the population of tunnel hogs, which was once large in the mountain range and has recently noticeably dwindled in numbers. As the tunnel hogs have become fewer in their southern regions, the dragon has started to show itself closer and closer to Glitzmakulki. Some settlements in the vicinity of the abandoned regions, have been raided by the dragon and completely destroyed. When visitors to these destroyed farms have reached them, they have seen traces of the dragon in the form of solidified magma and giant footprints. They could also see signs of battle, but despite how much or where they have searched, they have not found any trace of those that once lived in these settlements. It seems like the hunting grounds of the dragon have been extended during the last 10 years and are now seriously threatening the kingdom, just like 450 years ago when the dragon first moved into the mountain range. Despair filled the hearts of many dwarves of Glitzmakulki, and many theories have developed regarding the reason for this new renewal of the worm's threats. According to the dominant theories of the dwarves, mining nearby the lost regions have possibly invaded an unknown sacred place. Maybe they have awakened the wrath of the gods and offended the soul of the mountain by tearing down or destroying part of the mountain, which was not meant to be discovered by the dwarves, since in the mountain's will they were already perfect, without any needs for the dwarves' work. They say that it is better to to move those who live in the vicinity of the lost regions than to keep offending the mountain. The reasons for the extension of the dragon's territory has been widely discussed in Glitzmakulgi. Most believe that the foremost reason is the lack of food, and there are simply not enough tunnel hogs anymore to feed the dragon. But there are also those who believe that it is really about the strange rock that Jabashorv found when he and his 6 brothers were out searching for lodges in the depths of the mountain 5 years ago, just north of the Lost Regions. The rock was so big that it took 4 dwarves to embrace it. It was round in shape and had a rough surface. The stone, which now stands outside the golden house of Woodborovs for everyone to see, is not particularly beautiful to look at, but that it was brought up from the hot lava makes it almost holy. That it had resisted the melting power of the lava can only mean one thing, that the black rock must contain a large part of the soul of the mountain. Egil Thuls have investigated and are still investigating the rock, but no one has been able to establish what the spirit of the mountain wants done with this mighty rock. Those who believe that the stone is the reason for the dragon's activities claim that this is no ordinary rock, but a dragon's egg. The scholarly Drimuljev, who is also a main supporter of the idea that the stone is the reason for the dragon's attacks, claims that the yarnworms lay their eggs in lava and that they remain there for almost 500 years before they are brought up by the dragon to hatch. Drimuljev has therefore come to the conclusion that the yarnworm is not after food, but its lost egg. He agrees that it will not be long before Borshchev catches the scent of his egg, and when he discovers that it resides in the middle of a dwarven city, the fury of the dragon will soon destroy the rest of the land. Redmizjev, the Younger, and the Fleeing Brothers. There is a small branch of brothers that have had enough of living under constant threat, as their family has done for the entire time in the Foldgan Ridge. If it has not been the threat of the Borshchev family rushing out from the endless dark chasms, it has been the threat of getting eaten by the yarnworm or attacked by the trolls and the evil entity in the endless dark chasms. Redmizjev, the Younger, has, just like his now dead elder brother of the same name, taken it upon himself to continue what his namesake started 450 years ago. Redmizjev, the old elder, had had enough of all the threats when the dragon appeared in the southern regions. By persuading a handful of his closest brothers as well as a Thule, he started the, according to many, crazy task of digging a tunnel to the Silverspear Mountains in Silvtronder, because he had a vision about this being the place where the family should go, and not until everyone had made it there would the whole family be safe from both accusation and threats. He thought that the arrival of the yarnworm had been a portent of the gods, indicating that their rest was now or never. Now they had to move on to the place that would become their permanent home, which was meant for them. From his home at the edge of the Lost Regions, not far from the stronghold of Drogbazjev, the Fleeing Brothers have now been digging without rest for almost 500 years. Even if there were many who know about the brothers' attempts, they do not find much support among their relatives, who think that they are more or less crazy. The brothers who are sent out to Glitzmakulgi to tell the prophecy and mission of the Brotherhood have not been able to convince very many about what should be done. From their space in the square, they cry out about what needs to be done and that only the Silverspear Mountains can help the cursed people. They say that they now have received help from the gods, when they one day took down a wall that opened up into a system of natural caves and tunnels, which has taken them further on their way towards their promised mountains. They calculate that they have saved over 200 years of digging at this pace that they are currently digging, but if more were to join them in their efforts, it would not take long before they reached the Silver Mountains. People generally ignore the fleeing brothers as a laughable and crazy sect, but with the increased activity of the dragons, they may have managed to round up a few new recruits for their quest. The Brotherhood of Sad Homecomers. Besides the fleeing brothers, there is another group in which is called the Brotherhood of the Sad Homecomers. Despite the name implying a brotherhood, its members gather from all of the Glorkas that exist in Glitzmakulhi. The Brotherhood of the Sad Dwarves consists of apparently randomly chosen individuals who suddenly come to the realization that everything is wrong with their bloodline's existence. The realization can come at any time during their adulthood, from early years to the last years of life. The realization that suddenly manifests itself says that everything that has been done in Glitzmakulhi is wrong. The blood of Trudvang was not meant to survive the endless dark chasms. It was not even meant to go into the chasms. The meaning of their lives is to die, to be sacrificed for what they did wrong when they took down the protective wall which held the endless dark chasms away from Trudvang. When the realization has happened to a dwarf, there is nothing that can change his fate, which is to voluntarily lower itself into the merciful lava. Before the dwarf goes the way of suicide, they first go to the sorrowful cavern to make statues of themselves. The cave, which today contains thousands of statues in different postures and sizes, lies north of Glitzmakulhi, right above the great lava lake. Every dwarf who comes to the cave inspects the cave's walls upon arrival until he finds a place which has called to him. When he has found the place in the wall, he immediately begins to carve a statue of himself from the mountain. In this way, the cave will constantly grow, because every dwarf cuts his statue right out of the wall. When the statue is finished, the dwarf brings his tools and goes to the cave where the lava lake is. The path, or the stairway, which it really is, lies in the middle of the sorrowful cavern. The dwarf then has to walk past a number of statues which all portray dwarves, who through the centuries have felt the urge to embrace the same fate. The stairway then snakes down into the depths of the lava lake, where they sit down to meditate for a short time. When the dwarf has finally found the power to do what has to be done, he walks without hesitation to the edge of the lava lake and throws himself in, often with his tools still in his hands. But few have chosen to leave their tools behind. These tools are gathered in a great pile, which through the centuries has grown increasingly larger. Plundering Humans and Dwarven Defenders. The situation with the abandoned cities in the southern parts of the lands has, in recent years, become known among humans who live outside the mountain ranges of the Faldgan. With hopes of finding some of the dwarven-made objects that were left in the abandoned regions, they go into the mountain to find treasures. Many brush off the rumors of the dragon as a story to keep the unwanted away, but those who find one of the well-camouflaged entrances to the land soon find themselves in the clutches of the red-black beast. However, most of the treasure seekers wander around fruitlessly in the mountains. They grow soon tired of their endeavor and go home with stories as made up as the stories of the dragon. So they grow soon tired of their endeavor and go home with stories as made up as the stories of the dragon are believed to be. Everyone does not go to the abandoned land with hopes of finding dwarven treasures, some from as far as Midland, with a single goal in mind: to gain honor by slaying an ancient dragon. The fact that they find priceless treasure along the way is not something that stops them from entering the mountains. Because of greedy humans beginning to enter the lands, a small group of dwarves have decided to move out of the mountains, where they can defend the treasures of their families from ending up in the hands of humans. Along the cave walls, they have therefore built hidden watchtowers, which are constantly manned. The watchtowers are made with the greatest care, and only the most trained eye can see them at a distance. The towers are so well hidden in the landscape that you can pass just a meter from them without discovering them. The dwarves have guarded the entrances to the land, and they live high on the southern slope of the mountain, where the desolate city of Oskov once stood. When humans get near one of the entrances, the dwarves attack them immediately without any warning whatsoever. If the humans find no entrance, however, the dwarves let them go without intervening. The dwarves have discovered that the humans easily grow tired and give up. All these entrances are on the southern parts of Glitzmakulki, not far from the dragon-infested areas. The dwarves have destroyed the oldest and larger tunnels leading to the lost city of Olskov, while the new tunnels take very long routes to reach the heart of Glitzmakulki. This means that even if the human invaders might overcome the external gates, they have to be stopped in multiple sites, or they can be stopped in multiple sites throughout the very long routes. Greenyarp. The most important of these surface fortifications is a fort called Grimyarp, located high above the main gate, protecting the natural cave system that leads down to the realm of Glitzmakulki. During the centuries, the fort has always stood its ground against both wild folks and trolls' attacks. Grimyarp rises like a black block at the top of the Krug, over 3,000-meter high peak. The fort is crafted in large, black, compact boulders, which seem to lack joints. The surface is as smooth as marble and is adorned with thousands of mighty dwarven runes. The only friendly contact that these dwarves have with the surface inhabitants is the Amurs, with whom they trade gold for refined coal. The dwarves are incredibly fascinated by the Amurs' sophisticated technology to produce coal and try to get their secret. Over 2,000 dwarves constantly watch and guard this place and its vicinity. People other than the Amurs, who are regarded as enemies. The worst of them is the Drumlucht, which in the troll language means butchers of dwarves. These savage wild folk have occupied large parts of the Fjordland Mountains and spend time attacking trading caravans. The Drumlucht have thus far attempted many times to siege Grimyarp, although always without any success. Earlier contacts with the Westmarkians. Even if today the dwarves of Glitzmakulki, limit their dealings with humans to the friendly Amurs and the hated Drumlucht, there was once a time, so many millennia ago, when the kingdom had other ambitions regarding the surface of the world. Long before Borzjev the dragon invaded Glitzmakulki, the dwarves had tried to extend their rule southward, reaching the rich silver deposits of the Silver Spear Mountain, the mountain range. Nevertheless, their attempts failed, since they were defeated by the ancestors of the Westmarkians, who now rule Silvtronder. The most infamous battle that happened in Betmuld, just south of the Fjordland Ridge, where the dwarves underestimated the strength of human fortifications so much that they did not even bother to use the Svordlukum. However, there have been also friendly contacts, like those with Saj Ribland, a founder of the knightly tradition of Westmark, who gave back to the dwarves all the sacrificed objects stolen by Gumersheld Blackfire, another famous dragon of the past. Later, such links lead also to advantageous trade and exchange of ideas through links with the Westmarkians, which are nowadays very feeble, if existent at all. The prestigious tradition of the ironsmiths of the Trudvang in Sulftrondr, for example, clearly speak of a time when the humans learned some art from the dwarves of Glittheim, the dwarven masters of Glittheim. Grunkavorda. There is a legendary dwarven kingdom which flourished amidst the Stormlands in the most troll-infested area of eastern Trudvang, long before the Stormlanders ever existed. Dwarvish is difficult to understand and to translate, and Grunkavorda, which is the dwarven name for this kingdom below the enormous Trollridge Mountains, is the most easily translated with Vork to the name of Greydeep. Directly translated, the word Grunkavorda means halls of Greydeep in the Greydeep gloom, but the Stormlanders prefer simply the name Greydeep. These mythical fortified realms of the dwarves, once known as Trollvagoya's biggest rival, is now largely abandoned and left to the mercy of the Trollkin. Today, the kingdom is divided into several forts, forges, and mines, all fending for themselves. Aside from these small domains, there are a plethora of abandoned tunnels, halls, mines, forges, and other deserted dwarven habitats. All the surviving dwarves are Borjnika, which historically is the dominant dwarven breed in the Grunkavorda, since all Borjata's clans have been extinguished. Since the founding of Grunkavorda, Greydeep, the dwarves residing there have made a living by blacksmithing and metallurgy. Among all of Trudvang's blacksmiths, many of the greatest are said to live in the gloomy forges of Greydeep. Despite those blacksmiths' vast knowledge and skills, very few Stormlanders get to use the objects that the dwarves here create. Greydeep's dwarves only sell to a select few buyers, and many, more importantly, for a very high price. Dwarven objects from Greydeep are expensive, but their workmanship is excellent and durable. Mostly iron and steel objects are forged in the kingdom, since Mitraka ran dry in Greydeep long ago. The Mitraka Wars, the end of a kingdom. What caused the feud that divided the land is long forgotten, but most of those knowledgeable in the history of Grunkavorda agree that it has to do with the depleting Mitraka. When the dwarves of the land realized that their supply of the precious metal was almost gone, strongholds were built around the few existing deposits, and only the Glorkas that lived in the strongholds were allowed to mine the Mitraka. Before this happened, all the deposits of Grunkavorda had been amicably shared between all craftsmen of all clans in the kingdom, but this sharing suddenly ceased. Many Glorkas were left out and could no longer work with the precious metal. To not be able to satisfy the spirit of the mountain by shaping and creating its metal caused many dwarves to not accept the situation. Therefore, they tried to break into the strongholds that had been built, and when they were stopped at the gates, it did not take long before they, out of desperation, resorted to violence to get a hold of the metal that they thought they had a right to. During the course of a few decades, the land was transformed into a war zone. The land, which was once ruled by a single great kingdom, now became divided among many different factions, each with its own strongholds ruled by its own independent thune, master smith, or special councils. Those that had access to Mitroka did everything in their power to defend against those who had to go without. Strongholds were taken and lost so often that soon no one knew who ruled the different cave systems. As the years passed, the Mitroka depleted, just like the dwarves in the land. Dwarves killed dwarves. The wars took many victims, especially because many became so desperate without their metal that planning and strategy were soon forgotten. The metal pulled at them like a drug, and to live without it simply became too much for them. As the metal depleted and the dwarves in the land became fewer, the weakened strongholds in the land were soon overtaken by the trolls and other evil creatures which lived in Trudvang. When this happened, the surviving strongholds became even more isolated. The distance between the feuding dwarves became even bigger, which led to the war losing intensity and eventually ceasing after a few years. Only 5 strongholds were left of the former great land, around which now small lands grew up. The 5 lands today bear the names of Yelvorka, Ivonda, Ogistjev, Rostrai, and Novgorod, which in Vorsk are known as Greystone, Dustwall, Grimgistur, Vanderskalf, and Morkdali. Olgistjev. The Vork name Grimmiskur refers to the dwarves' settlement of Olgistjev, which lies in the east and is ruled not by a Thun, but a council of master blacksmiths. The council is known as the Iron Circle, and those who are elected to it remain members until their death. Today the Iron Circle consists of a motley group of Bjornika dwarves, where the oldest member, Fulvor Hammershaft, is said to be as old as 130 years. The youngest, Gargin Redtongue, is considerably younger at only 90 years. Despite the great difference in age, these 2 council members are very good friends and comrades in arms. Gargin is said to be the one of the Stoneborn, a reincarnation of the original dwarves made by Borjorn to become master smiths. Gargin's forging skills are very much appreciated among all the dwarves of Trudvang, and he is a living legend who gets great respect even among the Boracha smiths from other kingdoms. Olgisiljev its economy is traditionally based on forging of high-quality iron and steel, and on rare occasions, mitraka. It consists of 15 smiths, one of which is a legend in itself. In fact, the smithy is the only one in the Troll Ridge Mountains which has a loggia furnace with a real loggia inhabiting it. The production of iron recently almost completely stopped as a new opportunity appeared. The dwarves of Olgisiljev found a small vein of mitraka a few years ago, just outside the land's borders, which they are now mining as fast as they can. So far, the secret has not been discovered in the other dwarf lands of Grunkovorda, but the dwarves of Olgisiljev fear that this will happen at any moment, and when it happens, they have to be prepared for chaos. A guard of almost 500 strong warriors has therefore been sent out to keep curious eyes away from the mine. There is also plans for expanding the small territory claimed by Olgisiljev, so that the newly found mine is situated inside of it rather than outside. It would not be any problem to physically expand the border in the form of traps, defense mechanisms, and strongholds, but the bigger problem lies in that there are not enough warriors to protect the land. Because the mine lies a day's march away from the current border, an expansion might mean that the land's border became even less guarded. Even if it had been a long time since war raged in Grunkovorda, the excitement surrounding a newly found mitraka vein might be the one thing needed to spark another conflict. Ivonda. In the middle of the Troll Ridge Mountains, as a sort of axle of Grunkevorda, lies the now desolated mine of Yvonda, called Dustwall by the Stormlanders. An excellent kind of iron is still mined here, but of the 200 mine shafts once teeming with workers, only 15 remain active today. Adjacent to Dustwall is a small Borjanica dwarven colony that maintains the mines and makes sure that anyone wishing to mine them pays their fee. The community is led by Thorgagin Dragonslayer, a mythical hero from Tulvagoya who, because of a blood feud, was forced to leave his home over 50 years ago, but was accepted as a Thun in Yvonda due to his fame and valor. When he came to Greydeep, he breathed new life into the mighty mines, but at the same time claimed the right to collect payment from all who wanted to mine there. Thorgarin is a good friend of Gargin Redtongue of the Grimgistur, but is feuding with Ivornin Ringelin of Zvorda, the Zvorda leader of Greystone, and has therefore banned him from the mines. Furthermore, even if far from Tulvagoya due to an old feud, Thorgarin is an honorable dwarf who strictly obeys the old edicts from his homeland. He blocks the access to the cursed Rustroy, and his warriors are commanded to kill on sight anyone who tries to pass. Thorgogin's spies have found out that the dwarves of Grimmistur are mining something just outside their land's borders. What they are mining they have yet to find out, but there is a large force of warriors that was reported to have arrived at the mine. Thorgogin realized that it could only mean that the Grimsgistur dwarves were mining the desirable Mitraka. Because the mine today lies outside of Grimkistur's border, the mine is considered to belong to the former great kingdom of Grunkagorda, and therefore all dwarves who live in the land. Unfortunately, Thorgagin cannot gather a force as powerful as the one Grimgistur has posted around the mine. Furthermore, he does not want to openly oppose his friend Gargan Redtongue, even if Yvonda needs that Mitraka. Therefore, he must use other methods, but what these methods are, he does not know yet. Of course, he wants a part of the Mitraka, but the question is how to get it. And he knows that he must hurry because it cannot be a large vein, since it has been a long time since anyone found Mitraka in Grunkevorda. Novgorod. Novgorod, known as Mjorkdali in Vjork, is the name of the stronghold and city that also lies in connection with the Storm Gates, the only truly massive gates that led into the underworld realm of Grunkevorda. The fort houses more than 10,000 Borjonika dwarves, with some Vzorda, spread over 14 levels, making it the largest dwarven colony in the whole of the Troll Ridge Mountains by far. In the vicinity of Novgorod are caves, mushroom farms, and natural caverns, where one can hunt tunnel hogs and an underground lake. The gates, which are always closed, are very well protected and are guarded day and night by powerful warriors and thuls that have sworn to never allow uninvited visitors to enter. These guardians are called thulks and are a type of Knight's Order, which enjoy a special status in the Troll Ridge Mountains. Their role in the local dwarven society can roughly be equated to what the Knights of the Iron Hand do for the Gerbanian faith of the Stormlands. Novgorod is ruled and led by a high thulk, Orthvin Irongate, who during this time as the land's Thun has also set warriors to watch over the tunnels which lead deeper under the mountains. In secret, he has started planning to seize the entire land. He dreams of a unified land where all 5 strongholds are united in a single kingdom. He has sent out delegations to speak with the other Thuns of Grunkavorda, but none has shared his wish for a unified land. They believe that the land has thrived during the years that it has been divided, such as it is today. Orthvin's foremost reason for wanting to unify the strongholds is to cleanse Grunkavorda of trolls who have now taken over parts of the land. However, Orthvin does not want to be the Storthun of Grunkavorda. He is not after personal power, which he would gain with a unified kingdom, something he has always explained to the rest of the land's Thuns and master smiths. He argues that united they can perform a thorough cleansing campaign, and therefore the leaders of the 5 strongholds can together rule the land in a high council, with no member with more power than the others. The answers he has received have been the same from all the other leaders. They have thought that there are too many trolls and other nuisances in the abandoned halls and tunnels of old Grunkavorda, and even if the plan should succeed, it is not worth the trouble, because there are not enough dwarves to man all the abandoned parts of the land. Some believe that if they succeed at such a cleansing campaign, the power should not be split evenly and amicably between the Thuns of the different strongholds. They think the power should be divided according to how big their lands are today. And how many dwarves live in them. Of course, the weaker Thuns do not agree with this, and as long as this cannot be solved, Orthvin will never see a unified Grunkavorda. Rostray, or Runvorjolf in Vjork, is more a fortified prison than a city. It is located in the southernmost part of the Troll Ridge Mountains and can only be reached through a long corridor from Yvonda. Rostray does not have its own gate, so dwarves living here must travel all the way to the mines of Dustwall to see daylight. However, the mines of Yvonda do not like the dwarves of Rostray, who are usually attacked and killed on sight. The problem is in the nature of Rostray's population, the Slayers, a group of dwarves cursed and banished from other dwarven communities, especially from the mighty kingdom of Trudvang, which even if far, can manage to banish these criminals here. Rostray is, in fact, one of the many famous prisons where the rune-cursed slayers are confined, far from their homes and far from any relationships with their original Glorkas. In fact, the bloodlines of most of the dwarves here do not belong to the Grunkavorda, but rather to the Tolovskoya, where they committed their crimes. One of the smallest prison cities in Muspelheim, Rostray houses almost 1,000 sentenced dwarves, and, as in other prison settlements, its main guard and chief is a Thule. In this case, Pomvin Ilwil of Savorki's blood. Among all the leaders of Grunkavorda settlements, Pomvin is the one who has the best and more friendly relationship with the High Thulk Orthvil Irongate of Novgorod. However, if like the others, he has done nothing to contribute to Orthvin's dream of unification. The problem is that Pomvin Ilwil is completely focused on respecting his duty towards Trudvang, administering the prison of Rostray. He does not think that the Slayers really belong to Grunkavorda, and accepting his friend's dream may mean to betray Rostray's reason for existence. However, some of the Slayers have overheard rumors about Orthvin's dream, and intrigues and plots are secretly developing to make Rostray part of Grunkavorda. How the conspirators will face the rune curse of Yvonne's weapons is, however, still unknown. In Rostre, the prisoners make a living from mushroom farming, mead production, the product which they sell to the other dwarves in Greydeep, though authorized intermediaries along the tunnels of Yvonne, and various handicrafts. Juglavorka. The small Borjanica settlement of Juglavorka is in the northernmost of the 5 dwarven communities, which once were part of the old kingdom of Grunkavorda. It is a small land inhabited by around 4,000 dwarves. The center of the land consists of a city where almost half of Juglavorka's dwarves live. It is also this center, or city, if you want to call it a city, which given its land its Vork name of Greystone. The city is located along the outskirts of a huge cliff, and the dwarves that reside there live under the vault of infinity. The cliff facing north is adorned by a large number of balconies, which are linked by stairs. Some balconies are public spaces, while others serve as someone's private patio. This is, in the eyes of the dwarves, seen as a very strange city, as there are not many dwarves who choose to live so closely to the infinity above their heads, even though their home is still inside the mountain. On the outskirts of Junkovorka, large stones are quarried from the hard black granite, a practically indestructible rock, an excellent component for any fortification. The dwarves of Greymine have learned how to break the black granite with the help of their thuls, who have been bestowed with tools with a variation of rare runes, whose name is Stone to Clay, that makes it possible for them to quarry even the hardest stones. Thul arts seem to transform part of the granite into clay when the quarryman easily separates it from the bedrock. When the granite piece turns back into its original shape, it remains separated, ready to be worked into the desired shape by other, more normal tools. The black granite is exported to other dwarven communities throughout the Trollridge Mountains, as well as to other dwarven lands, but also to a smaller scale to Vortland, where the Stormlander leaders must pay huge sums of money for the rare, hard stone. Greystone is led by the Thun Ivornin Ringalin of Oktyr's blood, who is also one of the few Zvorda to have been raised to such a position of leadership. Ivornin controls the Grey Mines with an iron fist, and his band of heavily armored Zvornokun make even the mightiest of dwarves shudder. The exiles of Hilinge Woods. The thirst for Mitroka in Grunkavorda has led many dwarves to pure disaster, as demonstrated by the tragedy of Sergen Greathold. This Borjanica dwarf and his followers have tried for many years to find a fabled vein of Mitroka, after having led his men and his clan into a large cave-in during his search for the coveted metal, and the other dwarves in the Trollbridge Mountains that thought that Sergen had become mad and that he and his kin were cursed following the mirage of Mitroka. Sergen's dwarves were not accepted back into the Grunkavorda's kingdom, and they were therefore exiled above the ground. Sergen, who had always hated the sunshine, decided to head for the dark shadows of the Hilminge Woods in Dane, one of the Stormlands, which is on the eastern side of the Trollridge Mountains. Here Sergen had his own little kingdom, built above ground nearby the iron mines located in the midst of the forest, where metal ore is extracted. Now there is a small colony of dwarves living in the forest. Dane is mostly inhabited by Jorlings, a superstitious, non-Stormlander native population of humans who do not know the technology of ironsmithing. For the moment, the Jorlings avoid the dwarves, but it is unknown what will happen if the dwarves decide to sell their metals to them. Muspelheim. The Baracha dwarves are usually a minority in many dwarven realms, living sometimes as allies of the more numerous Borjanica dwarves, other times as enemies, or even as subjugated slaves. This is not the case in Muspelheim, the only underground kingdom in Trudvang, which is completely ruled and inhabited by Baracha dwarves. The kingdom is legendary, but also well hidden and defended by its remote location in a savage, uncivilized, swampy part of the Darkwoods, just west of the Wildland, in a southeastern part of the Great Iron Mountains. Here, many miles below the feet of the Einving Peak, the Baracha smiths have built a series of mighty furnaces where enslaved Loshi are employed night and day to purify and work the precious Mitraka. The number of Baracha craftsmen and active Loji furnaces in Muspelheim is impressive, and the mountain is here glorified with artifacts whose quality is unheard elsewhere. Muspelheim is called Sootbrand by the humans, although in the past the realm was known as Eignist, or Fire Spark, for the humans. The ambition and blood of Angor. The realm's leader is not called Thun, Storthun, or Great Thun, but Master Smelter. Reflecting his duty as a leader, the refining of the best Mitraka in Trudvang. The leadership is usually held by those of the ancient bloodline of Angor, a legendary Baracha smith who lived in the Great Iron Tooth at the end of the Age of the Iron Dragon, long before the foundation of Muspelheim, Sootbrand. It was Angor who crafted the ruling blade for his human ally, Arkan Kuljion, king of the Hurs, a nomad people who helped the dwarves in their eternal war with the trolls. The Hurs are today forgotten, remembered only by the dwarves, but their mighty sword, Korlagion, is still remembered in sagas, flourishing throughout the Stormlands, bringing also turmoil and change every time the sword reappears. But having crafted such a marvel was not enough for the blood of Angor. The great Iron Tooth could not contain the ambitions of those Baracha master smiths, too tired to share resources and compete with the Borjanica and Trulvagoya. When the new Mitraka veins were being discovered in the east, in an area where no other dwarf had settled at the time, the dreams of a purely Baracha kingdom spread like fire. This was how Lovenjika, a mighty predecessor of Muspelheim, was founded so many millennia ago. The glory of Lulinjika. All the dwarves of Muspelheim know that their kingdom did not start where they are now, but the first colony of the blood of Angor found their first settlement many miles below them, in levels which nowadays are closed and sealed, but which once hosted the mighty Lorjanika, the first Baracha kingdom of Trudvang. In the glory days, the ancient Lovlenjika, known as Sparklur to the humans and the elves, were one of the few kingdoms that could gather large numbers of Baracha sons, considered to be the mightiest stronghold in the east and the only great kingdom built by the Baracha race. Far from the winding tunnels, the rough-hewn surfaces, and the low ceilings that usually signified the Baracha kingdoms, Sparklur was famous for its majestic underground rock-cut architecture. Many refined halls have been created in Lovlenjika. But none was as magnificent as the Sun Hall. The enormous throne room. Few outsiders ever got to step foot inside the great hall, the arched vault, which reached higher than anything the dwarves have ever built. The ceiling was held aloft by a forest of pillars, each forged from Mitraka by the Baracha master smiths. There was exactly 585 pillars supporting the ceiling, all covered in runes, and inscriptions describing the heroes and heroic deeds of the Dwarven tradition. Each pillar was raised in honor of one of the 585 clans, a pillar for each tribe, to cover with his own heroes and stories. Set in the floor of the great hall, there was a diamond, larger than any other witnessed before. The dwarves called it Borjorn's sun, after the dwarves' creator and god. When the sun's rays reached the diamond through the long shaft of the rock ceiling, it reflected a light so beautiful that even the hardened dwarven eyes watered. The staircase, made of gold, leads up to the throne, the creation of which truly was an amazing feat of craftsmanship. 4 statues support the large sun shield upon which the tall silver throne sits. A backrest of the throne was so tall that it reaches halfway to the ceiling. The construction of the great hall was so sophisticated that if someone sat upon the throne and spoke in a powerful voice, they would be heard even by those at the very back of the hall. And that is the history of the hall that Ungorvin, the Stormvarn, took for his own. The fall of Lulenjika, the rise of Muspelheim. A long, long time ago, the old iron dragon, Ungorvin, woke up in the depths of Trudvang, where he had spread death and despair. But also, he heard legends about Lulenjika's wealth from the mouths of the half-dead dwarven victims. The beast's greed was inflamed, and so the Yarnworm left the realm of Mitraka to invade the lowermost, more magnificent parts of the eastern Baracha kingdom. The dwarves of Lovlenjika were easily defeated, and the humiliated fugitives locked the precious halls with the dragon still inside. Lovlenjika, or Sparklor, was declared to be a cursed place. Its gates therefore closed and guarded. The Baracha expanded in the upper levels, founding Sutbrand. But in 2,000 years, no one has ever dared go back down to the ancient Lovlenjika. Rumors spread about the Great Sun Hall. It was covered with a sea of golden treasures, magical objects, and amazing items, with the ancient dragon still sleeping atop his legendary hoard. Once, more than 1,200 years ago, a party of dwarven warriors led by the legendary Beowulf of Trudvang arrived to drive the mighty beast from the ancient halls. However, after the gate slammed shut behind Beowulf, none of those courageous dwarves was ever seen again. The Baracha assumed that Beowulf and his followers had been killed by the terrifying dragon, and that it would be pointless to make another further attempt to drive Ungorvin out. Those halls and tunnels cannot be accessed nowadays, since for centuries, every time intruders tried to enter the halls, the master smelters of Muspelheim had called upon the Zwarpdunkum to clear the area and lock the gates once more. The old city is lost, and the Baracha want it to remain locked. According to their ancient beliefs, the beautiful kingdom under Muspelheim is not to be recovered until a new great king of the Baracha arises, a wait that appears to be long. Sauka, the Conqueror. A few centuries ago, Such a wait seemed to be ended. The new realm of Muspelheim, Sutbrand, was so successful that its leader began to be tempted by imperial dreams, leading their desires even to the above-ground lands, something which seems so unlikely for the Baracha dwarves elsewhere, too focused on their work in their underground logia furnaces and too afraid to see the sun with their own eyes. However, ambition is a powerful force, and it can make things happen which are elsewhere impossible. After Salka, the conqueror of the blood of Angor, had overpowered the previous master smelter and seized the kingdom, he waged war against both the elves and the people of the Stormlands. He punished his enemies with sharpened axes and tempered iron shields at every turn. He made an abundance of mighty things, subdued many a rich homestead in the wildlands, captured and conquered the Hrim trolls with whips and black tongues. All of Salka's younger brothers, Jorvin, Sutka, and Molov, were also mighty warlords. Many strong warriors gathered under the crimson banners during the war, which lasted as long as Salka lived. And so it happened that Salka gathered all his warriors out on the plains, as these ironclad Baracha dwarves did not fear to fight under the sun in the domains of man. Those of Salka's Glorka all gathered by the hills north of Wolfswood and set up camp. Salka mustered all his soldiers and 2,000 Zvorkum, plus 10,000 other allied Baracha dwarves he had summoned from Cholvagoya's dark hollows. The dwarves stood on one side of the dark forest, and the human armies waited on the other. Late one night, as night once more conquered day, Salka attacked in full force and captured Filkjar, Olvin, Sergohuva. He ordered all of the Wildlanders to be killed. His armies gathered under Olvin's banner and were beaten to the ground, and Salka was hailed as the king and the great Thun that he was. At the same time, as Salka was using his axe in the dance of death on the battlefield of the Wolfswoods, a tall man carried a heavy sword wrapped in wolfskin, disembarked on a rickety pier in Stormhaven. Little did the dwarves know that their victory parade would be turned into a stinging defeat, and that the satisfaction in the winds of victory would slowly pull Salka and his dark warriors into the depths of defeat. For Salka's family recognized the weapon which the human warlord was wielding. It was Koraljon, the mighty blade crafted by Angor of his own blood, so many centuries before. Despair and anguish now diffused among Salka's armies. The story of how Filkjar Najar Hagtorn achieved peace and unity by defeating Salka is often told in the Hjald's songs and stories throughout the Stormlands. It is far less common to hear tell of Salka's fate and the Baracha dwarves, who then were forced back to Sutbrand, filled with hate and bitterness against the human race. Ever since that day, Muspelheim's Barachas have gone from the wilderness of the Stormlands. They closed themselves off in the dark hollows of their realm. In the dreamless slumber, they hunted more logi than ever, and their mystical furnaces burnt with a vengeance and a vindictiveness. Salka's descendants knew that in the burning wombs of the forges lay a final reckoning of Wildland. The realm of the Barachas. Muspelheim is completely separate from other dwarven kingdoms. If not for some completely forgotten or abandoned tunnels, the realm today contains 5 so-called smith cities, of which Lugar is the largest, and its 3 master smiths and 700 blacksmiths. The Baracha dwarves are tough and resilient. They persevere in front of hot furnaces for long stretches of time, hammering relentlessly at the anvils in order to shape the mythical matraka. The kingdom does not consist of great halls and armories, and they do not have bejeweled thrones, echoing ballrooms, arrow-straight tunnels, or endless cliff grottos with polished walls. Instead, Muspelheim is centered around the smithies, which stretch deep into the earth, where lava rivers flow, and the Mitraka hides. At the mention of the word smithy, most people will think of a small forge with an anvil or two. The Baracha smithies can fit hundreds of furnaces and thousands of anvils, and are in places which the dwarves have devoted themselves to the great art of metalworking. Many of the furnaces contain a captured logi, who, with its heat and flames, serves the blacksmiths. The kingdom is divided into smithies, and each smithy is headed by a master. It is these masters who carry on the ancient traditions, and only those who are considered worthy are rewarded with the secrets of how to forge Mitraka. The final product, the Mitraka, has great strength and beauty, but it is hard to forge, and the process to do so is long and difficult. The secret techniques are also taught by the masters. When the master dies, a new master is chosen from the elite that rules over each city. There is a vault at every loggia furnace, protected by a thick, round door, completely made of Mitraka, which is locked using a rune known only by the owner of the forge. No one is admitted to the vault, other than the master and the owner of the loggia furnace. They keep all the most precious objects in these subterranean vaults, which contain both chainmail armor and swords, drinking vessels, and shields. Most of them are beautified with Mitraka, detailed with silver and gold threads, and bejeweled with gemstones, which gleam green and red. Some of the vaults contain black armors, which have been handed down for thousands and thousands of years. Very few of the Baracha dwarves are Zvordvakum, owning a Zvordvakum Maki, an ancient suit of black armor. But those who do value it more highly than all other objects and treasures they have. The power in Muspelheim today. Today, Muspelheim is ruled by Master Smelter Beldor, of the powerful bloodline of Angor, the Master Smith. He is in charge of the daily Mitraka production in the main city of Lugar, but will travel to the 4 other smith cities in Sutbrand from time to time. He is a strong, resourceful Baracha dwarf who always wears an apron made of silver plates with a matching mask and gloves to protect him from the smelted Mitraka's spatter. One of his main concerns is to always get the best Mitraka production in Muspelheim, trying to surpass even the best smithies of Trudvang. Beldor is also the spiritual heir of Sauka, the Conqueror, and therefore he is also nourishing imperial dreams. He has sent his brother, Dunkilja, in secret missions to the outside world, trying to find opportunities and alliances to help him expanding his kingdom. Hopefully also to bring doom on the Wildlanders who humiliated Sauka so long ago. He has also contacted the Wild Arcs, trying to exploit the recent news about Mitraka finds in the Great Iron Tooth before the nearer dwarves of Trudvang do it. Beldor is always surrounded by a number of Zvordvakum in their black Mitraka armors, of both Zvorda and Baracha breeds, protecting him against possible attacks. The Angor Master Smith, in fact, knows that the Master Smiths of Dovgorden and Agorda, the Dovgorden and Agorda Glorkas have been growing enough in power that they could overthrow the millennia-long dominion of the Angor clan. But it is not for the ancient hate that it divides the two brotherhoods. It is the two Glorkas that have a dispute about the relics lost millennia ago, during Ungvorev's invasion of Lungjanika, and the Master Smelter has kept on feeding the fire of complete of competition between the two throughout the use of secret plots and spies. Lolgar. Around 3,000 dwarves live in Lolgar, the main center of Muspelheim. The city is located in a gigantic cavern carved from rock. The city is, just like the Loja furnaces, built in stacks with several levels. The architecture is unlike anything else in the known by the inhabitants of the surface. The houses are built on top of each other, and the city grows as one single immense multi-layered building as the society gets richer. To the uninitiated, it is essentially impossible to navigate the city, which consists of countless corridors, tunnels, stairs, and rooms, which lead deeper and deeper into the city center. In order to prevent Lolgar from collapsing, the dwarves have stretched enormous chains from the rock walls into the city. At the heart of the city, there are 16 Loja furnaces located in Lolgar. A river of boiling lava, which the dwarves simply call Zvordo, runs through the city. Lojar is completely separated from the above-ground world, but there is a series of secret and well-guarded accesses used by Beldor's spies and his agents. The long underground way connecting Lojar to the surface is blocked by a dark subterranean lake inhabited by giant snakes, which dwarves crossing it use armored boats. There is also another route. One can travel by railway, using a vehicle similar to a trolley. Finally, there are steep staircases leading to the main gate in a 2-day journey. A dozen freight cars can be connected to the trolley vehicle. The slaves running the trolleys are usually goblins, supervised by hardened dwarves. Aside from these 3 ways out of the city, there is an endless number of hidden passages and crevices in the rocks. Where they lead to is known only to a select number of dwarves. Sutholm and the Gate of Muspelheim. An old, vegetation-covered dwarven road, dating to the imperial times of Sauka, cuts through the swamps of the Darkwoods, not far from the hidden gates of Muspelheim. Not far from the site lies the small settlement of Sutholm, a dwarven outpost of Muspelheim or Sutbrand. Sutholm is the home of the smithy Borjako, the Borjako clan. Since time immemorial, a curse has been laid over the Borjako, and then, 55 years ago, the dwarves of Muspelheim had enough. They blamed the Borjako for the fact that a small, inconsiderable vein of Mitraka had run dry, causing the gold to stop flowing, and insisted that the family's curse was one of the reasons the Loja furnaces of Sutbrand did not burn as eagerly as they should. The Borjako Brotherhood was cast out of Muspelheim and have lived near the gates ever since. The clan is very small, being composed of only 7 dwarves, and they are led by Surgove, who is also a Thule. They work and live in the smithy surrounded by a spear-covered moat. Surgove tries to neutralize or confuse any visitors who try to look for Muspelheim. He is scared that the dwarves down in Sutbrand would blame the Borjokos if strangers were to enter the kingdom. The area around Sutholm is swampy and infested by forest trolls who ignore how to enter the dwarven realm. It is the very heart of the swamp, a monumental gate that was cut by the dwarves in the vertical cliff faces of the Ainvin mountain. The stone gate is covered in an entwined pattern with cryptic runes adorning the top. It is said that these runes carry some secret magic who allow the few who know the secret password to enter the Baracha's kingdom. The double gate, standing more than 20 meters tall, is flanked by 2 gigantic statues of dwarves with 2-handed battle axes. These statues are actually Stonefilges, who currently are in a deep slumber, placed there by the Baracha dwarves to guard the entrance. There are also, though, other entrances hidden in the swamps, especially in the form of exhausts and vents conveying the smoke from the smithies below. However, all of these sites are heavily guarded by stone fylgjes in the shape of ancient Dwarven warriors. Thordun. In the southwest of Trudvang, among solidified lava, sulfur-fuming lakes, and volcanic mountain tops, lies the dwarven realm of Thordun. Inhabited by both Borjanica and Baracha breeds, it is the only great kingdom of dwarves where the entire population lives out from under the protective roof of the mountain. It is not by their own volition, however, that they chose to live beneath the malicious and infinite open sky. Several centuries have passed since the disaster that not only exterminated an entire tribe of Borjanica dwarves, but even forced the more hardened Baracha dwarves to flee from the mountain. It happened during the last eruption of the mighty volcano Grorgun, nearly 800 years ago. When the embankment that had held the lava enclosed deep beneath its layers of stone broke, the mountain quaked from the release of pressure when the lava found a free passage up and out of the mountains. The roof of the great cavern collapsed during this great convulsion that followed when the embankment was leveled, and it was this collapse that prompted the horrible disaster. For the cavern in which the roof collapsed was filled with gas that had been formed over millennia since the creation of Trudvang, gas that was in a very concentrated form. When the gas found its way out of the cave which it had been trapped in, it did not take long for it to fill the entire Dwarven kingdom. The gas spread through caves and tunnels with the strength and speed of an autumn wind, poisoning everything in its path. Borjanica dwarves who were exposed to the gas hardly had time to react before they fell down, suffering immense chest pain and dying in mere moments. The tougher and hardier Baracha dwarves, however, were more resistant to the advancing gas. Since they lived in the depths of the mountain to a greater extent than their cousins, the Baracha dwarves had developed a resistance to the gases that could be found within the mountain. The gas that poisoned the mountain, however, was a new type which the dwarves had never encountered before. Unlike the Borjanica dwarves who died from exposure, the Baracha dwarves merely had breathing problems followed by terrible headaches. Some also grew ill and hurled up anything in their stomachs. A forced exile. In just a few days, the gas had filled the entire kingdom and killed every single one of the Borjanica dwarves, and also many of the Baracha dwarves. Soon the Baracha learned that the gas was not as dangerous to them as for the Borjanica, as long as they only were exposed to it for short periods. None could live among the poison fumes for long, however. It seemed that only the Borjanica dwarves were completely sensitive to the gas, since men and elves, who much later, for varying reasons, entered the mountain, had returned in similar conditions as those of the Baracha dwarves had experienced. That the intruders later died at the hands of the dwarves had nothing to do with the gas. The survivors of the disaster decided to make what they could of the situation and took their tools and other necessities that they needed and started to settle the outside of the mountain and forge a kingdom above the ground. The mountain was so rich in resources that they simply could not bring themselves to move to another mountain, for the mountain held not only the noble metals, but also hid gems in its depths, and although the Baracha dwarves of the mountain are considerably more interested in metals in their forges, the gems have proved to be an excellent complement to the completion of their items. Dwarven Thuls, along with all kinds of workers, immediately started to shape the solidified lava in record time. The first above-ground city had been built just outside the gates of the Old Kingdom, the city of Thurga, as it was later named, has grown very large over time in the greatest city of the new kingdom above the ground. Other lesser cities have since risen from the landscape of solidified lava and sulfur lakes, and each has had at least one tunnel that leads down deep into the mountain and its riches. The cities are built around a great loggia forge that is larger than most buildings. Although it is very difficult to bring the loggia above ground, the dwarves have succeeded in some cases. The creatures do not seem to thrive above ground as they do below the surface, however. The few loggia that are brought to the surface are placed in the largest furnaces where the metal has been prophesized for a certain destiny in the forge. The dwarves working in teams around the loggia furnaces, and although it is unusual in other dwarven realms, one can sometimes see as many as 5 different brotherhoods sharing the space around the furnace at the same time. Most of the furnaces are only large enough to make to provide enough room for a single clan at any one time, however. A life divided. Every day, the dwarves enter the depths of the mountain to mine ore or search for gems that they then bring back with them to the above-ground city. All processing of ore and cutting of gemstones is done above ground, since the dwarves neither can nor want to spend much time in the mountain. The search for new deposits is constant, and some task forces have made it their sole priority and specialization to look for these. Dwarves with a profession are among the hardiest of all in the realm. They sometimes spend a whole month in the caverns before they return with an immense headache due to their long sojourn among the poisonous fumes. They dig and mine their way through the never-ending mass of the mountain, and although it can take years before they find a worthwhile new deposit, they always return to the tunnels with the same stubborn frenzy as soon as their headaches have eased. They truly live to explore the inside of the mountain, and every time they find something that they are filled with a new vigor in a way that they could best be likened to ecstasy. Therefore, many dwarves get stuck into this profession and can't imagine doing anything else, even if they have grown too old to search. The rapture becomes like a drug for them. Once a deposit has been found and the intoxication of the moment has subsided, they immediately feel the urge of finding more excitement, something that can only be accomplished by finding another deposit. In other dwarven kingdoms, the Barutja never leave their dark halls and underground furnaces. Therefore, their flesh is pale, even under the dark soot which they are all usually covered in. However, this is not the case of Thordun, where the Barutja dwarves have developed a much darker skin tone than those of their usual kin. They have learned to live beneath the threatening vault of infinity, and some have even started to worship, or at least pay respect, to both the sun and the moon. This can, of course, not be uttered openly, but the phenomena is reflected in the craftwork of the dwarves, and they often depict both suns and moons. Although these dwarves aren't afraid of the sun, most of them still choose to work during the night, for the rays of the sun are too bright for the eyes of the dwarves. But with every passing generation that comes from the depths, the dwarves become more and more fit for life above ground. This has been somewhat of a curse, however, since their improved sight in the daylight is balanced by the detriment of their sight in the eternal darkness of the depths. Hidden vaults. Just as before the disaster, the dwarves still lock their crafted items into vaults and hidden stashes in the mountains, where they are meant to rest, which has the consequence that there are no completed items in the above-ground cities for long. The items are meant to rest in the mountain, whence they came, and nowhere else. The dwarves are, however, forced to use some of their items in their daily life above ground, and those artifacts are thus not hidden away in some vaults or hideout. Such items are nowhere near the well-made or as beautiful as those that can be found in the hidden vaults. Despite this, they still fulfill their function, and it is common knowledge that even an item of lesser craftsmanship is of utmost quality if made by a dwarf. Other than the tools that are used for the production of the items or in the shaping of the mountain, it is primarily weapons that are used by the dwarves of the kingdom. Just as in many other places in Trudvang, trolls and beasts thrive in the inhospitable places where mankind hasn't settled. In these mountains, in addition to the usual trolls that always seem to tarnish Trudvang, there are 5 tribes of Chiras, or wormfolk, as they are called in the tongue of man. These scaly creatures live in complex tunnels among the highest peaks of the mountains. In contrast to the dwarves and other creatures, the wormfolk seem unaffected by the gas and poisons, and inside the mountain, or it could be that the gas hasn't spread so high in the mountain. Whatever the case, the wormfolk have proved themselves to be a hostile addition to the dwarves' lives outside of the protective walls of the mountain. The wormfolk often attack smaller towns and villages since they developed a taste for the tough dwarven meat. Since the wormfolk live in such inhospitable environs, the dwarves have not been able to eliminate them and therefore must live under constant threat of being attacked. It is not just the above-ground villages and towns that live under the threat of the wormfolk. The Chiras have found a way in the lost underground kingdom that the dwarves still haven't been able to find and demolish, and many dwarves have disappeared without a trace in the mountains. Lately, some signs of battles have been found, but most dwarves disappear without any trace at all. That the enemy has managed to enter the old kingdom is something that troubles the dwarves immensely, not just because many of their kin have disappeared during the expeditions into the mountains, but perhaps more so because the wormfolk have managed to find and break into some of the dwarves' precious vaults. The hatred that the dwarves harbor towards the wormfolk is profound, and many dwarves choose to devote their lives to slaying as many of the wormfolk as possible, instead of honing their crafts. This is, however, a very difficult task, since the wormfolk are not only tall and strong, but also armed with dwarven-made arms and armor that they've appropriated and altered so that they fit their size instead of the dwarves. In fact, the fact that you could meet your end at the point of a dwarven forged weapon is, of course, something that only furthers the warrior's hatred towards these enemies. All right, so that was all of the Dwarven kingdoms. Let's do a quick look. Let's see how far this goes at the dwarves elsewhere. This would be outside, yeah. And then this gets into the racial characteristics and things for the game. So here's the last few pages of the dwarves outside of Muspelheim. So in the human and elven kingdoms. Dwarves elsewhere. Dwarven kingdoms, however, have this is the main 9. So the previous chapters have described the main 9 Dwarven kingdoms. However, dwarves have roamed Trudvang for millennia. Therefore, many other minor settlements exist. Most of them are relatively small, with less than 50 inhabitants, while others are just empty ruins, relics of earlier time periods. The surface world has been rediscovered multiple times by the dwarves throughout the centuries. Each time they have left their mark only to disappear later on, since the dwarven race knows only that its only real home is in Muspelheim. A few rare, small enclaves of dwarves can be found also in some of the largest human cities, usually composed by exiles or by trading merchants and artisans from Muspelheim. Moreover, dwarven craftsmanship has always been praised and admired by human lords. Therefore, dwarves have left their unmistakable mark on some of the ancient monuments which embellish the human kingdoms of Trudvang. Legends and sagas always speak of the ancient dwarven arts with awe and admiration. Meatland. Meatland is the ancient land, and throughout history there has been many contacts with dwarves, even in the places where such links are today forgotten. These contacts have been mostly with the great kingdom of Tovlgoya, the Ymir dwarves of Brukmuskrim, and the inhabitants of Dorg Gromitsa. Some old fortifications and castles in Midland show weathered dwarven ruins or display clearly dwarven building styles, suggesting the dwarven architects and workmen may have been hired to build them in ancient times. This is true, for example, in Manjord for the forts of Gunnarsal, Tryggvason, and in the great city of Manjord itself, where also kept a legendary black Mitraka armor gifted by the dwarves to the great king at the beginning of the Age of Stars. Furthermore, the Isenbrand Fort in Argi are certainly built by the exiled Ymir dwarves, and its gate still displays the inscription, "No dwarf will be refused entry, even if only for a short visit." Angerboda. The famous Midlander city of Angerboda, or Iron City, in Manjord, is famous for the iron trade. Many cultures and religions coexist here, and dwarves are present too. This is a place where good Borjanica ironsmiths can make a good business, displaying their superior arts. More than 100 dwarves are squeezed into tight iron workshops in the northern parts of the cities, which has almost 4,000 inhabitants. For obvious reasons, dwarves keep to themselves, but brisk trade of everything that concerns iron objects occurs between humans and dwarves. To be honest, from a dwarf's point of view, it is perhaps not the best of the dwarven blacksmiths who live here, but in many respects, a poor dwarven blacksmith's work is much better than many humans can accomplish. Lucky people who can communicate with dwarves in their own language can be offered to taste the famous krustmead, which is brewed from krustal mushrooms that the dwarves grow in small caves below their workshops. The mushroom has an intoxicating and clearly confusing effect. The person who drinks it becomes aggressive and combative. From time to time, this leads to heated discussions among city residents about whether the dwarves should have the right to cultivate the mushrooms. Some would go so far as to throw the dwarves out of Angerboda, which has led to some disruption in the city between dwarves and humans. Roklev. In the southeastern part of the Great Iron Tooth is a land which is called Roklev, or just Rok. This is a huge area and hosts hundreds of iron mines that supply Midland with the iron ore, which is the key of Manjord's greatness. Once the mines belonged to the dwarves of Tovlgoya, but after a short war, an agreement was made trading these mines for a smaller Mitraka deposit, which the Midlanders would not have been able to properly work. Now both humans and hired dwarves work night and day to mine the desirable iron in Roklev. The ore is of very high quality and is the best that has ever been mined by the people of Midland. The Plains of Bohain. The history of relationships between Midlanders and dwarves is not very long, but also complicated. It's not only very long. It is not only very long, but also complicated. The dwarves have waged many wars against the Midlanders, but have also been very faithful allies against many common enemies. The plains of Boheim in Runvik are for example, was the site of the Battle of Five Spears, where a desperate alliance of dwarves and humans and elves defeated the evil Cloakmaster and his horde of trolls, giants, and evil wildfolk. As a memory of the heroic sacrifices, a large golden willow was planted here by the elves. And quite often, people still find half-buried remains of the battle. Most of these weapons and armors are too rusted and badly weathered to be used. However, a couple of years ago, there were rumors about a precious dwarven sword, crafted in the purest Mitraka, to have been found by chance in the plain by a ranger. But coming here may have been its price, since the plains of Bohain are a haunted place. Even if there are significantly less ghosts here now than 100 years ago, the spirits are about to fade away, and they almost only appear when the moon is in its highest and the night its deepest. In those nights that traveling dwarves sometimes visit the plains to pay homage to their ancient brothers who died here, so far from the mountain. There are also stories of dwarven ghosts who offer prophecies and counsel the younger members of their own Glorkas. However, some frightened visitors also whisper about damned and maddened dwarven spirits who bear tragedy and misfortune to the visiting brothers. What a visitor is really bound to find, it is difficult to say. Shelkfield. Shelkfield is a cold, ruthless, wild part of Runvik, surrounded by the dreaded Darkwoods, where trolls are numerous. According to an old story, this is the area from where the ancestors of the Bults, Arks, Wildbrons, and other wild folk came from. It is a grim and mist-covered highland, whose residents are either living as herders, hunters, or warriors, and it has always been so for many centuries. The human clans in the area live more wildly than what is typical of most Midlanders. Most of them follow the Eeld tradition, but Haminges is practiced in the woods, where clans with even stronger blood ties with the Arks, which they have helped with, they help ravaging other lands. Way up in the northeastern parts of Skjoldfell, where the highlands meet the Great Iron Tooth, it is said to be a small colony of Borjanica dwarves, possibly from the Tulvagoya, where there are few who have seen these dwellings, but it is said that these are above-ground houses, which, if true, must certainly be considered highly unusual. If and why they live here under the sun, no one can say for certain, but the people living in the highlands who claim to have seen the dwarves' dwellings can be counted on 10 fingers. When the dwarves were found here, nobody knows what the dwarves found here. Nobody knows. Their tendency of avoiding the wild humans may suggest that they were protecting something. Soj. Beyond the half-drowned kingdoms of Dalmtatsba in Dalheim, the southern islands host some dwarves, only in the western Isles of Idras, while most of Soj itself is forbidden to them, as it is to humans. Stalik. Idras is the only island of Soj where humans and elves live in harmony, and here 3 Bracha clans came too. During the Age of Prophets, founding an underground colony in the Tring Mountains, the elves and dwarves never got on well, but they have never been at war with each other. The dwarves keep to their side and nurture their mountain, the elves to theirs. As a matter of fact, the Baracha have never been interested in the surface here, and their presence is almost unknown and invisible. Only an empty and deserted hole open off the mountain, attesting that there are dwarves living here. The Baracha have never bothered to build a proper gate to the surface or to dig an easy-to-walk tunnel. For those who try to enter and reach them, it takes several days to penetrate down into anything that even resembles a dwarven town. However, a small Baracha settlement really exists, many miles under the Trig Mountains, where the dwarves live near a lava river, which they have baptized Rurinka. Stormlands. The dwarves, which the Stormlanders mostly deal with, are those from Grunkovorda in the Troll Ridge Mountains, and even these contacts are not frequent. Dwarves and Stormlanders tend to ignore each other, and even their very rare relationships are characterized by prejudice and suspicion. However, some rare commercial routes exist, as demonstrated by the black granite, which is quarried from Jungavorka to be sold in Vortland. This precious stone is coveted by the Vortlanders, which pay a high price for it, since they need it to building or repairing most of the magnificence of their fortifications, and the most holy of their Gerbanian monuments. On the other hand, the Baracha kingdom of Muspelheim does not have any relationship with their neighboring wildlanders. Centuries ago, Baracha went to war against them, driven by an arrogant imperial dream. They still remember their bitter defeat, even if it is nowadays forgotten by most wildlanders, if not in some old song or saga. Therefore, the Baracha remain hidden, keeping their kingdom a secret. Some possible rare dwarves remains exist in the Stormlands, standing as mysterious ruins of a time nobody remembers. The Stormlanders, unlike the Midlanders, do not keep exact records of history, especially of the most ancient times. Sometimes the Stormlanders live among the forgotten signs of dwarven craftsmanship without properly understanding them. For example, the mighty Trollmark Castle in the western Idgeland, nowadays the seat of the most important Shield Jarl, was certainly built by dwarves when the world of Trudvang was young. Unfortunately, no one today remembers why or for whom the legendary dwarves built it, or for which price, in resources or blood, the local humans paid to dwarves to have such a monument. Ice Peak Mountains. The Ice Peak Mountains rise like snowy spears at the Bjorn Woods' northern frontier, separating Wildland from Finnheim. Every dwarf seeing these peaks immediately falls in love with their beauty. However, very few living beings can survive here. Not even the hardened trolls can thrive in the harsh cold and treacherous landscape. No dwarven mine is present in the Ice Peak mountain range. Many times during Trudvang's long history, minor dwarven clans have tried to dig their way down under the hardened roots of the mountains, but they have all failed. Black, empty shafts are reminders of such attempts digging through the Ice Peak Mountains, made of implacably hard granite and gneiss. These majestic mountains have remained untouched ever since they first burst forth from the rock-filled soil of the Stormlands. Even so, every so often, new dwarves are enthralled by the possibility to get in touch with the prohibited soul of these beautiful mountains, and a new colonizing attempt is made. None of these have been successful thus far, but dwarves will possibly continue trying forever. The Tinder Swamp. This part of Edgeland is a large swamp, enclosed in hot, steaming fog since antiquity. Not even during the coldest winters does the swamp freeze to ice, but instead simmers like a bubbling cauldron. Many of those who have ventured here have been sucked down under the wet ground, forever devoured by the hungry swamp. In the northern parts, you can still find remains from ancient cultures that were here long before man came to the Stormlands. The architecture strongly resembles that of the dwarves, and many insist that it is a dwarven kingdom, which had been pushed up from the surface, built thousands and thousands of seasons ago. Most dwarves today have no memory of these places, but it is not to exclude that a lost colony of Yuglovgorka, or even of the great kingdom of Tulvagoya, was established there millennia ago. Westmark. The signs of ancient dwarven craftsmanship can also be seen in some of the oldest castles of Westmark. Like, for example, for the core of Silverport Castle, the Silvtronder, although later modifications and expansions hid the original Dwarven foundation, the castle of Longhest in Vistergulp was also originally built by dwarves from Thordun, and some legends speak about a secret passage leading to an underground fortress designed by the dwarves. Ancient trade links between Glitzmakulji and Siltronder were once very active, but not so today. On the other hand, there is at least one major human merchant in Nor, a city in Bicent, trading with Trolvagoya objects which the Westmarkians covet as precious artifacts, but which are almost insignificant for the dwarves who craft them. Many times the Westmarkians have fought with dwarves in the past, and they know very well how terrible the armored warriors of Muspelheim can be. Long ago, Glitzmakulji once had an imperial dreams on Silvtronder, and more recently there have been rumors about the dwarves of Thordun preparing an invasion of Wistergulp. Although this is yet to be proved true, in reality the attack is about to come from the dwarves of Brodpath and a small dwarven holding adjacent to Thordun, as described below. The Herenstalls in Wistergulp. There is at least one noble Westmarkian family with friendly relationships with Thordun. Since their holdings lie in the northern slopes of the Thordun Mountains, more than 800 years ago, the lords of the Herenstal family in the province of Nurten of Wistergulp found a Matraka vein, which was traded with the dwarves in exchange of a treasure which made the Herenstal's fortune for centuries. The family has been a strong ally of the Thordun dwarves, which also built the castle in Alten. According to the stories, there are those who have benefited from the dwarves' wars with the trolls, so the Herenstalls could colonize the northern slopes of the Thordun Mountains. The head of the family, Korlaman, has been recently killed, and according to many people, his heir, Meldrick, has taken refuge among the dwarves. The lands of the wild folk. Throughout the long history of Trudvang, the relationships between dwarves and wild folk has been so varied as numerous as the different wild folk tribes and peoples. Quite often, these savage warriors have tried to pillage the dwarven treasures, causing war and conflict with the sons of Borjorn. On the other hand, there have also been those who engage in trade and friendlier relationships, usually involving the exchange of rare and desired resources, like high-quality coal traded by the Amurs to the dwarves in Glitzmakulji. Exemplary of this second type of attitude are the recent agreements between the Arks of Nordland and a clan of Baracha dwarves. The Arks needed good dwarven iron weapons, and in return for these, they have shown the Matraka veins to the Baracha. The underground of the area is, in theory, part of Trolvagoya, but the Baracha miners are not linked to the Great Realm at all. They are, in fact, kin and subjects of the Baracha realm of Muspelnist, or Sutbrand, in the east, which is benefiting from this resource through secret and well-guarded trade routes. Since the dwarves of Trolvagoya are too busy with their own inner conflicts and civil wars, they have not discovered this secret yet. However, they have never been too friendly with the troublesome Arks, and the ambitious Baracha dwarves of Muspelnist have always been mistrusted competitors. If stories about the new Matraka vein will reach the Glorkas of Trolvagoya, war is bound to explode in the underworld below Arkland. The Kingdom of Brovim in Thorkul. In the wildlands of Thorkul there is a dwarven kingdom of Brovim, ruling over the slopes of Brovpath and its surroundings. these dwarves are not too far from the kingdom of Thordun, but they are also clearly separated, since there are those of Brovmir's blood that have built a kingdom which in no way typical of dwarven society. They have in fact noticed the dangerousness of the volcanic landscape, adapting it long before the dwarves of Thordun did. In fact, because of the mountain's bowels are so very hot, the realm of Brovim is built in underground cities, which are not deeper than a few meters into the mountain. And they prefer to dig only the upper parts of the mountains and hills. It is only the kingdom's working mines which are built deeper into the hot interior of this volcano country. The presence of the dwarves can be noticed even outside Muspelheim, since the houses were cut off the mountain's vertical cliff walls, which from a distance look like a mighty fortress filled with balconies of all sizes and shapes. The dwarves of this realm follow Jormel Brovmir, whom they call Storthun of Brovim. Trusting his ability to compete even with the greater kingdoms, the great Thun Brovmir has in recent years prepared for war, and the reason behind this is due to what has recently happened in the neighboring Westmarkian land of Vispergulp, where a series of dark chasms have been opened by an earthquake about a century ago. Here, some of Brovim's prospectors have recently inspected the chasms in secret, identifying typical shining mineral-rich veins, usually only found in places where the coveted matraka lays hidden. Great Thun Jormel Brovmir has already sent out several mining squads who, under the cover of night, travel to the dark chasms and climb down into them. At the bottom of the dark chasms, they disguised their makeshift abodes and immediately started searching for the matraka. New mining squads arrive all the time to the various mining facilities to increase the scope of the search and to speed it up. The Great Thun waits for messages to come from the mines confirming the suspicion that matraka has been found, and the breaking of the metal has started. As soon as this occurs, Jormil shall travel with his army to salvage the matraka. To their smiths. However, all of this is happening without taking into account the much more powerful kingdom of Thordun, which has been too busy with its own problems with the volcanic lands to notice Brovim's activities, or the humans of Istergolf, which are yet to properly identify Brovim's dwarves, or the other Westmarkians, like Ovis's spies, which often cannot distinguish Brovim's dwarves from those of Thordun. Vicentia and the Lost Vrakelmard. What everybody knows about Vicentia are the swamps, ever-present water and eternal fog, covering the lands. This is a demon-cursed country, home of plagues and undead and other monsters, mostly shrouded in mystery and avoided by those who have some common sense. Many odd, Vintner-fueled phenomena happen in Vicentia. This country is in fact extremely dangerous, and whole armies have disappeared into nothingness of Vicentia's swamps. As a further confirmation, the Ovis of Westmark has explicitly forbidden dealings with Vicentia. Even so, some rare explorers have managed to enter the area, and oddly enough, some signs of ancient dwarven activity have been found. There are rumors about a scholar of Vintner, Ilwin Merwim from Kür, having risked her life and soul to explore Strongherd, a place she thinks to be the gateway to Dimhall. She claims that in the Leifrot forest, a huge flaw in the dark Vintner is constantly pumping out of the ground. A flow of dark Vintner is pumping out from the ground from a huge hole at least 300 steps wide. To her surprise, she saw that the large hole's edges and walls were all made of beautifully polished stone, clearly proofs of refined dwarven craftsmanship. However, in the place, the barrier that normally separates the worlds has been torn apart. Ewelin looked straight into one of Dimhall's many colonies where souls were being tormented by horrific creatures. Nobody knows how Ewelin survived, but her mind and psyche were definitively devastated by the experience. Later, she visited Muspelheim looking for answers from the wisest and oldest dwarves. Unfortunately, there was simply no record about any dwarf clan who had lived in Vicentia. However hard the dwarven scholars tried, they could not find an answer to the question, or according to others, they did not want to reveal a dangerous secret, which has destroyed a whole kingdom in antiquity. In any case, humans are what they are, and they are always dreaming about dwarves, or what dwarves may possibly hide, creating fantasies and stories about the lost treasures large enough to make the king's treasures fade in comparison. The fabled lost dwarven kingdom has ever been given a name which is in both Rona and Vork means roughly the same thing, Velgermard, the kingdom of the forgotten. Some claim that the kingdom is not abandoned at all, as attested to by stories, but about the many unnatural phenomena in Vicentia, boiling lakes and ponds, mysterious lights appearing over bogs and lakes, and even vast areas whose surfaces are covered by a hard glass-like substance. Many humans believe that all these signs are just the side effects of the mysterious dwarven underground operations, possibly linked with the smelting of rare and otherwise unknown metals. Whatever the truth, no one who has ever dared looking for the lost treasures of Volgarmard has ever returned. Dark Vintner flows strongly in Vicentia, and something more terrible than hidden dwarves definitively lurks in the swamps. All right, so that's the conclusion of the Dwarven Kingdoms. That was the dwarves outside the kingdoms, and here's all the rules. Well, thank you very much for listening. So that will conclude Muspelheim. We had to make it a 3-parter because there was so much stuff. So we'll also look at the 5e conversion for Trudvang Chronicles called Trudvang Adventures. And there's also some tales from Trudvang, some nice fiction that was written for the setting. So those will be coming in subsequent nights, but thank you everyone for your kind comments and attention to all these readings. This has been a fun thing to do, and it's gotten me really excited about this setting in a more playable system. So it'll be nice to see what Free League has in mind with the Trudvang setting for Dragonbane. So thank you for listening, and there will be a weekly this week. We've taken a little bit of time off over the holidays. So subscribe to the channel if you want to be notified when we go live again. We're currently playing Palace of the Silver Princess, the B3 basic module for we're using Old School Essentials, and we'll be picking back up with the Swords of the Serpentine campaign as well by Pelgrane Press. So thanks again for joining me, and thank you very much to the members and patrons for all of your support in making this possible. And there'll be some more readings coming up, and we'll take a look at the system. And I think with the 5e conversion, we'll compare the original Riotminds system to 5e and kind of see, why they did it to make it, to get the setting in the hands of more people. And then we'll kind of speculate on what it's going to look like with the Dragonbane rules. All right, so take care, and I'll see you again soon. Goodbye.